cultfiggatv. Revolutionary salute. Revolutionary salute. Like, share, subscribe. Welcome to the House of Revolution. You know I'm your humble host, the Yao mean of revolution, the end of the Arab kingdoms. I told y'all this is gonna happen. Now they got to pay. Iran refuses peace, only wants war. But before we get into that, be sure to wipe your feet. That means hit the like button. You in the House of Revolution. Like, share, subscribe, support the platform, y'all. Well, the Arab kingdoms tried to play a double game. Now they got to go. Let's get into the content. Salute.
Trump yesterday said that they have a prize for him. Iran sent him a prize, a gift, and that they're talking and that they want to talk. Today, there was a publication of these supposedly 15 points of the United States. Trump rehashed 15-point Iran plan unlikely to appease Tehran. And what I would like you to understand now is all of that is complete garbage. All of this is nonsense. Neither the United States nor Israel or anyone else, by the way, on earth is in a position to dictate anything with Iran. Iran will be dictating what's going to happen. They're trying to portray this illusion in the minds of the people that they somehow have the upper hand. They have the lower hand. Iran is stepping on their genocidal child-killing heads. That's the situation that we have. The United States is in no position to dictate anything.
No position.
Against Iran. But they're doing this for a reason. Firstly, there are lots of conflicts in what they're saying. So they're saying that, and later on, a White House spokesperson, she said that Trump doesn't bluff. He is prepared to unleash hell if Iran doesn't accept the agreement or the proposals. Again, trying to make the people think that they are even in a position
like Iran
to impose anything on Iran. Iran will be imposing the new reality. The world post the Epstein regime and genocide state.
The Iranian Revolutionary Guard just released a post saying the world needs to understand this. The U.S. Air Force and their Navy sets them as the most powerful in the world. That's where their power lied. And he said, what did that get them? Nothing. Why and this is the RGC. Why the hell would they be afraid of the U.S. sending troops? I mean, like, they wish you would have started with that. Trump is that's his we'll send troops. They laughing at you.
War of aggression and terrorism against Iran, and Iran's response with True Promise 4 will never be the same again. Iran will be in a position where it can dictate everything to do with the
I told y'all, I said it before. I said if these Arab nations get out of line, Iran will invade them. I've been saying that. Now Iran is saying that. I knew that. I knew. That's only the logical thing. Iran is the only one with the ground force. They're a 1 million-man army. They army can seize territory. Saudi Arabia can't. Bahrain can't. UAE can't. Qatar can't. Kuwait can't. Now Iran is letting them know. Y'all keep playing with us. And we're going to be seizing the coastline of the United Arab Emirates. We're going to be seizing the coastline of Bahrain. They're putting them on notice. And I want everybody to remember this. What have Iran been bluffing about? What have they said they would do and they didn't do? So that lets me know they're absolutely going to invade those Arab countries. They're going to get them. They've been waiting to do this.
Conclusions. When will this war end? How it will end? Under what conditions? When will they be interested to talk? Right now, they're not talking.
Because it came out. And you know what? It's people in the U.S., they pissed that the Arabs done got them into this. So it's out. The Wall Street Journal, New York Times, they are reporting Saudi Arabia is pressuring Trump not to stop. Send ground troops. The Arabs, see, they've been saying Israel. It ain't just been Israel. It's been the Arabs too. They paid blood money to Trump. They didn't give Trump no $500 million jet for free. No, that was $500 million hit money on Iran. And now the U.S. is releasing information saying the Arabs been pushing this too. So the Arabs might as well fight because they done for.
Talking. This is very important to understand. They are not talking to them. There are countries that are having efforts. Iran isn't talking. Iran made public what they're expecting, but they did not speak about a ceasefire or any talks. They said that the United States and Israel, they need to be punished severely, and they need to adhere to all of the Iranian demands, and they will be controlling when the war ends. Iran said from the get-go, the era of the United States dictating when the war begins and when the war finishes is over. That's why the bar is high, and that's why Iran is preparing to impose everything that it wants during this war. Now, all of this is coming also as a way for the United States administration to cover up something very important. And that thing, ladies and gentlemen, is the fact that they are trying to occupy Iranian territories. Iran is aware of it.
That's a mistake.
This was published by the parliament speaker today. Based on some data, Iran's enemies, with the support of one of the regional countries, I will tell you about that, of course, are preparing to occupy one of the Iranian islands. All enemy movements are under the full surveillance of our armed forces. If they step out of line, all the vital infrastructure of that regional country will, without restriction, become the target of relentless attacks. Before we go into which country that is, almost for certain, by the way, how comes he's so certain that the United States is preparing for a ground invasion? Well, they deployed troops. There are more deployments to the region, 5,000
big dummies,
American troops preparing to conduct an operation. Trump didn't hide the fact that he's interested in occupying the Khark Island, but it's not just about the Khark Island, so that they can get rid of this pain that Iran is inflicting upon them. And the pain that Iran is inflicting is only on the criminals, on the terrorists, on Israel, the United States, and anyone allied with them, anyone allowing them to use their bases, anyone having bases that belong to them, anyone who has any sort of link to this aggression against Iran. They're being punished the way they should be punished. And the Iranian punishment is only increasing. Now, what islands is he most likely talking about? There are multiple options, but the fact that he said with the help of one country is a strong indication that we're talking about the UAE. And the reason is Iran and the UAE, they've had a historical issue with certain islands.
Not gonna be no UAE after
these are the islands that they have issues with together. Lesser Tomb, Greater Tomb, Abu Musa. These islands were historically controlled by the UAE. In particular, one of them was Ras Al Khaimah, one of the Emirates, before their unification. Of course, at the time, there was the British influence too, because these countries, like Israel, gained independence with the blessing of the previous British Empire. That caused a lot of the destruction and problems all across the world, deliberately, of course, typical neo-colonialist, arrogant approach to wreak havoc across the world and maintain control. Then the United States, of course, took over with the influence, but that's a historical thing. In the early 70s, Iran, led by the Shah, who was installed as a puppet by Britain and the United States to counter and get rid of the democratically elected Mossadegh, who nationalized the oil, these same countries, this same puppet occupied these territories. Therefore, we're talking about a historical event that happened before the Islamic Revolution of 1979. Now, typically with any revolution, with any big changes in the country, you don't just simply make concessions out of any historical gains. Iran kept those territories, but to this day, the UAE asks that Iran turns them back, gives them back to the UAE.
Imagine the United Arab Emirates finna lose a lot of their territory playing with Iran, and Iran already warned them. We're gonna invade you, playing stupid.
That leads us to believe, almost for certainly conclude, that this country that will be participating or is looking to participate with the United States is none other than the UAE. Why? Because of this conflict, because they have been allowing a very large number of attacks from their territories. They are tied not only with the American side, but with the Israeli side. Their previous chief of the police, Tahi Khalfan, said that they need to be allied with Israel outright. So we're talking about, so some people lost shame completely, as in, and they would be interested in such an attack that would potentially come from the United States. Of course, the UAE as a country, you can't even compare them to Iran. And many of the Gulf states, they have nothing in terms of force compared to Iran if it wasn't for the United States, for example. But they would likely allow the United States to use their territories, and then they would sell it to the public as a campaign of liberation. So you will start hearing all of a sudden, oh, historically, actually, it's not just we're helping the United States, you know, it's not as if we're participating in aggression against Iran. This is a historical feud, and we need to participate to liberate the islands that we're talking about here. Plus, there were previous mentions from Iran, so we didn't only have this statement from Qalibaf. We had other statements before that Ras Al Khaimah in particular will be obliterated if something happens. One of the Emirates. Now, Iran conducted very many attacks. As a matter of fact, a number of the attacks, if not the majority of them, were on the UAE, which indicates that this country was the primary source for the aggression against Iran. Let's remember that they have a treaty with Israel, so they could recognize Israel. They have deals with them. They're under what is called the Abraham Accords, and they have ambassadors, and there is, of course, this intelligence and security coordination between the two countries, which makes it a favorite from an Iranian perspective to be attacked very heavily should the United States help or come with the excuse of helping the UAE to target these locations. Iran, of course, is prepared for this operation. Iran knows very well that the UAE is planning that with the United States. They know that the deployment is there. They know that the deployment is ready. And from their perspective, they're prepared for every scenario that may come out of this. Right now, misinformation spreads faster than facts, especially on the most sensitive global story.
So a lot of our allies appear to be confused, including the Saudis. They say, well, look, we want you to end the war. In fact, they're part of the negotiations to end the war. But at the same time, we want you to escalate the war. Now, the Israelis are not confused. They want only escalation. But at the end of this story, I'm going to tell you what the real goal of the Israelis is, because it wasn't clear until Joe Kent started to talk about it. The New York Times has now confirmed it. And this story is also going to tell you why getting out of this war is going to be very, very difficult. The two sides are so far apart from each other. So an enormously important story. By the way, on Thursday's Young Turks program at 7 o'clock Eastern, we're gonna interview Joe Kent and talk to him about all this as well. But first, let's start with the theoretical peace negotiations. So our allies, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Pakistan had got together and in Pakistan to launch the negotiations, and they invited the Americans. The Americans were like, yes, great, wonderful, we'd love to do it. We got to get out of this war. One slight problem, they forgot to invite the Iranians. They're the other side of this war, so those negotiations are unlikely to go anywhere without them. So, of course, partly kidding, they didn't forget. They tried, and the Iranians largely said no. Now, there is talk of a backdoor channel to the Iranians. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about the role of the Saudis and then get to, unfortunately, how getting out is near impossible. All right, so what do these allies want? Well, the Wall Street Journal explains, during the back channel discussions last week, Arab leaders were especially focused on opening the Strait of Hormuz. They called for the strait to be overseen by a neutral committee that would allow safe access by all ships. Now, that makes a lot of sense. Of course, they all want that. Their oil is blocked and can't get through the Strait of Hormuz. Their oil fields.
Daydreaming, Iran running straight now. There's nothing they can do. The end of the Arab puppets. Saudi Arabia playing a very dangerous game. They ain't gonna have no kings soon.
Gas fields are being bombed in the Gulf, so they have a very high incentive to get this thing wrapped up, but in a way that works for them because there's a giant bogey for them that came after the war started. We're gonna get to that in a second. Wall Street Journal continues, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard replied that Iran should collect fees from transiting ships, just as Egypt does now with the Suez Canal. SpaghettiOs. So therein lies the rub, guys. Before we started the war, everybody could go through the Strait of Hormuz. Now, Iran blocked the Strait of Hormuz and no one can go through it unless they have permission from Iran, and some do. We've allowed some of the Chinese ships, etc., to get through. Why? Because we're worried about the price of oil. And so now Iran realizes after the war, wait a minute, apparently we totally run the Strait of Hormuz. Why don't we charge a toll like the Egyptians do at the Suez Canal? Now, the Saudis, the folks from the UAE and many other countries are like, whoa. Now we have to pay more to get our oil out and we have to give it to Iran, who is oftentimes our enemy? Yeah, maybe you shouldn't have started the war. Maybe you should have listened to some of us who said this is a disastrous idea. Now, to be fair to the Gulf countries, they didn't really want this war in the first place. But now that it has started, the Saudis have changed their minds about how to end it. Get to that in a second. Now, meanwhile, Qatar, Oman, France, UK, all saying, please, let's negotiate, okay? We gotta get out of here. This is terrible for the whole world, asterisks, except Israel, who loves it. So Wall Street Journal reported that Trump, after he was informed of these negotiations, and this is the part where it's a little dicey, and you could tell that the administration is happy about these leaks. I'll give you a quote from Caroline Levitt in a minute to prove that. But they say Trump's shift followed a series of closed-door discussions through Middle Eastern intermediaries that US officials gave them hope. An agreement to settle the conflict was possible. It also reflected a growing desire by Trump and some of his advisors to bring the war to a close. So now that's important in a couple of ways. Number one, our press is saying, and rightfully so, this is in a rare case, it might have been about the price of oil and the stock market. Only some in the press are saying that, but whoever it is, credit where credit is due, that's closer to correct, right? This is kind of a halfway leak from the administration to cover their own ass and to go, well, I mean, it wasn't just about the manipulating the markets, and it's not because we're desperate. It's that Oman asked us to come to these negotiations, and we thought, Oman, how could we not go? And that's why Donald Trump gave this 5-day buffer. All right, yeah, sure. But also it's important to note that the Americans do want this war to be over as quickly as possible. Not just the American people, that's already baked in, but now the administration realizing, oops, we screwed up here. So now let's go to the New York Times. They explain the Saudi motivations. They say Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman has been pushing President Trump to continue its war against Iran, arguing that the US-Israeli military campaign presents a, quote, historic opportunity to remake the Middle East, sounding like the Israelis there. So wait a minute, how could the Saudis want to get to a peace deal, but want to remake the Middle East and continue to go with Iran. Because at this point,
Saudis are finished. They're gonna want Pakistan to protect them from Iran. Pakistan is protected by China, not by the nuclear weapons. It's the Chinese weapons that protect Pakistan. If China pull out from protecting Pakistan, India would crush Pakistan. Saudi playing a dangerous game, and after the music stop playing, they're gonna be left without a chair. Watch, they're fucked.
Point. The Saudis have realized, not the other Gulf countries that I mentioned, just the Saudis. Yeah, it's too late. Now, if America leaves, we're at the mercy of Iran because they've been bombing us to no end, and we got barely any defenses. We're huffing and puffing about, oh, we got this big military, we could do a lot of damage. But we can't stop a damn thing, and the Strait of Hormuz is closed, and I gotta pay taxes on it now? Now that we started, we gotta go all the way in. So how do they wanna remake the Middle East? Back to New York Times. Trump has at times seemed open to winding down the war, but Prince Mohammed has argued that would be a mistake. People briefed on the conversation said and has pressed for attacks against Iran's energy infrastructure to weaken the government in Iran. But wait, if you thought that was bad, and it is, get a load of the next sentence. Prince Mohammed has.
That's why immediately when Donald Trump and Israel threatened their energy sector, they threatened everybody's energy sector, all of the Arabs. Iran don't want them. We're gonna send your ass back to the Stone Ages if the U.S. and Israel attack us. Saudi Arabia, they fucked anywhere it go. So they want the U.S. to destroy Iran, but they're gonna be destroyed, and the U.S. is losing horribly, and so is Israel. And now Iran know that the Saudis tried to play them.
Advocated ground operations in his conversations with Trump. Okay, so look, let's pause here. First of all, the Saudis would like us to expend American soldiers for their benefit and more American dollars for their benefit. Well, I have the same answer to them as I do to the Israelis. Go pound sand. Not my business, man. You have this war with Iran. You say you didn't want it. You chose the wrong alliances. You chose Israel, and that's who the Saudis have been working with this whole time. UAE is totally in bed with Israel. Oh, it turns out Israel screwed you. Who could have seen that coming? Me and every analyst, but you schmucks didn't see that coming. We, on the other hand, try to help you guys. So if you're starting your own business, at some point you're gonna need a shop. We have shoptyt.com. Yeah, but really, who do we use? Who do we trust? Well, that's Shopify. Shopify makes everything simpler. It makes checkout way simpler with the big purple button that they have. That really has helped us a lot. And overall, they've been wonderfully responsive to us. We wouldn't do it with anybody else. So if you're gonna set up a shop for anything that you're doing online, make sure you're using Shopify. And right now, if you sign up, you only get $1 per month trial. $1 per month trial today at shopify.com/TYT. That's shopify.com/TYT. So now you want us to fix your problem with American ground troops? Hell no. Now, of course, our answer is going to be yes, because our leaders are corrupt and don't work for us at all. They work for the highest bidder. The Saudis will dangle some money in front of Trump, and the Israelis are dangling everything else in front of Trump. And Trump is like, help the Saudis and the Israelis. I love it. Like, where's America first? Okay, here's a simple idea, not talking to the press at all, because discussing it is anti-Semitic. Why don't we use Israeli troops for the ground invasion? Why don't we use, okay, is this Islamophobic? Why don't we use Saudi troops for the ground invasion? If the Saudis and the Israelis want ground troops so bad, why don't you use your own army? I mean, your armies that you constantly brag about. The Saudis are like, they better not let us get into the war. Okay, who's stopping you, big guy? Okay, and the Israelis, IDF. Yeah, the IDF is fantastic at murdering women and children who are totally defenseless. But when it comes to Iran, they're like, no, that's a meat grinder. Send in the Americans, the schmuck Americans. We bought all their leaders, and we'll drive them into the meat grinder. And that is what's happening. Later in the show, you'll see the Israelis are talking about taking more land, including Lebanon and Syria, big parts of Lebanon and Syria, because they figure, well, America's gonna pay for it. Why not expand our empire? So now, let's go a little further into the disaster and why none of this is gonna work anyway, because we're not gonna be able to get out. Okay, so So the Saudis are thinking, well, I don't want to pay that tax. So you go in further. Now the Gulf states, Wall Street Journal says the Gulf states are unified in their anger with Iran. Arab officials said, but they're also angry at the realization they aren't able to exert much influence on the Trump administration's decisions, despite being security partners and investing heavily in the relationship, they said. Oh, you schmucks thought that Trump was gonna prioritize you over the Israelis? Man, look, you have to remember, these are like 8th generation, 18th generation, like interfamily married royals. Okay, like they don't know anything in the world. They're like, oh golly gee, we gave a lot of money to Donald Trump. I bet the entire infrastructure of the United States that supports Israel will turn around immediately. God, you guys know nothing. Wall Street Journal continues, Arab states thought they had successfully lobbied the US to prevent such attacks after an earlier Israeli strike on fuel depots in Tehran. That's earlier in this particular war, not the June war. Instead, the US allowed the strike on South Pars to go ahead after receiving advance notice from Israel, American and Israeli officials said. So they're like, well, Trump promised us, and we've given him, all this deals, and Kushner billions of dollars, his son-in-law, that he wouldn't bomb and he would keep the.
Imagine they all pay for their own destruction. It's so poetic. They thought they was gonna put a hit on Iran and then boomeranged on them. Now they've been finished. Now they're finished, and so is the US and Israel. That's just a fact, bro.
Israelis from bombing the oil fields, because if they do, or the gas fields, then the Iranians are gonna strike back and bomb our oil fields and gas fields. So a good thing we got Trump under control. And Trump's like, oh, the Israelis asked for something? Right away, sir. I'm so sorry, Benjamin Netanyahu, for not doing it earlier. So he's like, yes, let's bomb their fields. And the Saudis are like, what? You said you weren't gonna bomb the fields. Hey, schmucks in the Gulf, America works for Israel. How did you miss that? How bad is your intelligence? They bought 94% of our Congress. They've given Trump $337 million. Let alone the fact that our entire media is like, poor Israel, the victims of victims doing self-defense. You didn't notice any of that? That our media and our politicians are totally in the tank for Israel? They're so blind and ignorant. All right, so Trump seems prepared, they say, to pursue a deal. Telling reporters Monday that some Iranian leaders could usher in a better era of US-Iran relations. So this goes into the delusion of Donald Trump. He thinks, we got this, man. They're gonna surrender any second. Here's what Trump said. We're dealing with some people that I find to be very reasonable, very solid. Maybe one of them will be exactly what we're looking for. Look at Venezuela, how well that's working out. See, the Israelis, and this is a story a little bit later in the program, convinced Trump that this was going to be easy. Oh, it's just going to be like Venezuela. You're going to go in and murder their top leaders, and then you're going to find someone very reasonable. His name is Reza Pahlavi Jr., the Shah, who works for Israel, right? So that plan didn't work. So then they're like, I don't know, find someone else. But wait, Israel has a plan B that is way worse, apparently. So, and Trump, the moron, believed it. And so he's constantly looking for, who's going to sell out? Who's going to sell out the regime and the entire Iranian people and be our puppet? Who is it? And our intelligence guys keep going back to him and go, there is no such thing. The Israelis made it up. Again, partly why Joe Kent came out. He's like, the Israelis are giving us intelligence that isn't close to true, okay? But schmuck Trump doesn't know that, so he's still waiting. So now wait, is all this a real leak? Like, is it like, oh my God, Wall Street Journal got it? Or did the Trump administration secretly want to leak this to say, oh, we're not doing market manipulation and the war's almost over and everyone's on our side? And look at the Saudis want to go in deeper too. So here's a quote from Caroline Levitt. There are sensitive diplomatic discussions and the US will not negotiate through the press. This is a fluid situation and speculation about the meetings should not be deemed as final until they are formally announced by the White House. Now, you might say, Cenk, why'd you even read that to me? That's like a standard PR thing. No, that is a non-denial. That means, oh, you want to run that story about how all of our allies want us to go deeper into the war and that we really had this wonderful peace deal, but it's all Iran's fault for not stepping up? Exactly what we want you to print? Sure, print it. I won't deny it, and maybe it'll be confirmed later. Okay, so when you read things like that, guys, you begin to get a sense of who's doing the leak. who's bringing you this story, because you have to know that motivation, because the press doesn't let you know. They help scam you guys. So back to the Wall Street Journal, because now we're getting to the disaster. So now we're wondering, how's this war gonna end, right? Well, as a condition of any deal to end the war, they explain, Iran is demanding that the US and Israel pledge not to launch future attacks. Tehran is pushing for compensation for damages sustained during the war. So not only is Iran demanding a solid promise from America to never invade again, well, that promise from the Israelis would be hilarious. It wouldn't be worth the paper it's printed on. They'll attack the very next day. So, but for the Americans, we're unlikely to make that promise, but we can make a general promise. That's not the harder part. The harder part is we're gonna give Iran reparations for a war we started. Now, there's logic in that, but do you think that the Americans are gonna do that? Yeah, like inconceivable. So what Iran is asking for, like, why don't you pay us for this dumbass war you started as reparations for your mistake, and we'll take an apology with it, is unlikely to come to fruition. But wait, there's only one group that's more unrealistic, and that's us. The US still wants what it sought from Iran before the war started: the dismantlement of Tehran's nuclear work, a suspension of its ballistic missile program, and a stop to its support for proxy militias. So this is the same load of totally undoable horse crap that Israel talked Trump into in the first place. Not only do we want to end all of their nuclear enrichment, let alone nuclear weapon program, let alone the fact that it doesn't exist and it's been destroyed, but they have to give up every single missile they have. And they have to give up their own foreign policy and let America and Israel run their foreign policy.
I used to be the best. I had it all. Respect, money, a happy marriage. You need.
Which country would agree to that, let alone a country that at this point, because of the massive damage to the markets the closing of the Strait of Hormuz is doing, they're kind of winning. Like, yes, their military is destroyed, but apparently it's not destroyed enough for us to open up the Strait of Hormuz. And we're the ones looking for a peace deal, and Iran won't even show up to the peace negotiations. You think those guys with that amount of leverage are gonna go, oh yes, of course, sir, we will surrender completely to you and grovel at your feet, Benjamin Netanyahu, and give you all of our missiles and all of our guns and all of our children and whatever else you like? No, that means we are nowhere near the end of this war. The two sides, American side is as unreasonable as it has ever been. The Iranian side has become more unreasonable. Well, or they've gained more leverage. So no, if you hear stories about the wars almost coming to an end, they are utter garbage, not remotely true. No one's moved off their totally intractable positions. Now, while the Saudis want to open up the Strait of Hormuz as the rest of the world does, Israel has a different objective for this war. And it is devastating. Joe Kent actually talked about this in his interview with Tucker Carlson. He's gonna be again on the program on Thursday. Make sure you check that out right here on YouTube. But now the New York Times confirms what Joe Kent said. They say analysts say Israeli officials would probably view a failed Iranian state that is too caught up in internal turmoil to menace Israel as a win, while Saudi Arabia views a failed state in Iran as a grave and direct security threat. So on that one, the Saudis are right. If you have a failed state in Iran, it's gonna affect the whole region. You don't know who's gonna win. Maybe the most radical guy wins. And you don't know what they're gonna do with their military. They weren't offensive before, maybe they'll turn offensive now, right? So meanwhile, Israel goes, oh, we would have loved to have a puppet in there that reports directly to Tel Aviv or Jerusalem. But barring that, let's go with chaos, where we destroy everything and everyone is distracted while we take southern Lebanon, western Syria, we further decimate Iran and they have no defenses. They're in a bloody civil war where they're killing each other instead of defending the Palestinians. Perfect, a recipe for death, destruction, and chaos. And by the way, guys, that's the New York Times reporting Israel's objectives. That's not me saying, hey, I think. In fact, when I first heard Joe Kent say it, I thought, That seems uncharacteristically dumb of the Israelis because in the long run, that's not going to help them either. You don't want chaos in the Middle East. That's crazy. But then the Israelis are so radical now, and they're so wild-eyed, they can't see straight either. They're like, yes, we want anarchy in the Middle East. The Muslims kill each other, yes, right? Yeah, but you crazed radicals, you freaking terrorists, that kind of chaos winds up blowing up on everyone, including your beloved Israel. But they can't see straight, so they're rooting for chaos. And these are our allies? These are the guys we're doing the war for? And these are the guys who pretended, oh my God, we're so concerned about the Iranian people. We're worried the mullahs are gonna kill them. We have to go in and save the Iranian protesters. And after the war starts, the New York Times confesses Israel's plan is to have as many Iranians kill one another in a disastrous and deadly and catastrophic civil war. That's Israel in a nutshell for you guys. And that's the guys that we are following loyally, blindly, and cannot disagree with. So we're in for a world of hurt.
This is the CJ Whirleman Show.
Hello, it's your friend CJ Whirleman. And this week, we reveal how and why the Iran war could cause the United States to collapse within the next 6 months. But first, please remember to like and subscribe to our show. And don't forget to turn your notifications on so you never miss a single episode. Now let's get into it. From the moment Netanyahu first seized power in 1996, he has sought out American presidents who are stupid and reckless enough to sacrifice American lives and the US economy in a war to topple the Iranian regime. This war of choice has become an unmitigated disaster for the United States, causing soaring deficits, skyrocketing food and energy prices, rising unemployment, and a collapse in stock, bond, and property prices, which is why Trump desperately wants to cut his losses and run.
I think we're going to end it. I can't tell you for sure. I don't like to say this. We've won this. This war has been won.
Trump is making nonsensical, befuddled, and contradictory statements like this for the simple reason Iran has him locked in a steel trap. You don't send an additional 2,000 US Marines to a war you've already won. And certainly not when a majority have said that they don't want to die for the state of Israel. But die in the Middle East they will, because Iran has Trump cornered, leaving him with zero off-ramps or opportunities to de-escalate. Now that Tehran has stated clearly it will never reopen the Strait of Hormuz to the United States or its allies until all of its demands are met, namely the removal of all US military bases from the Middle East, reparations, and an ironclad, internationally mandated agreement that guarantees Iran is never attacked again. None of which Trump or Israel is likely to agree to, which means Iran's blockade of the Strait of Hormuz will continue indefinitely, causing the price of oil and inflation to continue their rapid rise before ultimately bringing the US economy to its knees. This criminal war may have been started by Israel, but it won't be over until Tehran says it's over. And certainly not a day before it believes it has inflicted enough economic pain and suffering on the United States. So neither Trump nor future US presidents ever think twice about bombing Iran again.
این که ما میگوییم آتش بس نمیخواهیم نه به این دلیل که دنبال جنگ هستیم، به این دلیل که این بار این جنگ باید به شکلی تمام بشود که دشمنان ما دیگر هرگز به فکر تکرار این حملات و این تجاوز نیفتند.
One analyst likened Trump to a child who has never played the game of chess before, in moving his king to the center of the board and then wondering why he's getting attacked.
Unexpectedly, when this war broke out, unexpectedly, they started sending missiles to UAE, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Bahrain, and elsewhere. And nobody thought they were going to. Were you equally surprised by that, Pete?
Way more than we thought.
Pete, do you want to give about a 3?
Trump just admitted in a single sentence that he started a war without once stopping to consider what the enemy might do next, making this war the worst planned military campaign since the ancient Chinese military tactician Sun Tzu published his book 3,000 years ago. Trump's buffoonery and corruption is why the Iranian regime has the United States so firmly locked in its grip, and the American president knows it, which is why, in a desperate effort to save the American economy from the illegal war that he and Israel started, Trump was forced to lift sanctions on Iranian oil. A move described by former CIA Director John Brennan as not only a catastrophic defeat for the United States, but also a $14 billion handout to the enemy.
Lifting sanctions on Iranian oil, that money, which is now going to flow into Iran, is going to be used in order to continue to sustain the Iranian government, to be able to sustain its military apparatus. And so therefore, it's very clear that, the Trump administration is trying to alleviate some of these global energy and oil market pressures. But at the same time, what they're doing is allowing Iran to be able to benefit from that relaxation of sanctions. It shows the inconsistencies in these policies.
Credible analysts are warning that if the United States cannot reopen the critical waterway within the next 6 months, then the US will face total economic, political, and social collapse before the end of the year. A forecast shared by prominent Chinese-Canadian professor Jiang Shi-Qin, who has gained global notoriety for accurately predicting major geopolitical events, earning him the title of China's Nostradamus.
But right now, the Iranians are actually threatening the very existence of Saudi Arabia, UAE, Bahrain, Qatar. And why this is important is that the Gulf states are really the linchpin of the American economy. So what they do is they sell petrodollars and then they recycle the petrodollars back into the American economy through the investments in the stock market. And right now, we know that the entire American economy is propped up by AI investments in data centers. And a lot of that comes from the Gulf states. So if the Gulf states are no longer able to sell oil and they're no longer able to finance AI, this AI bubble in the United States, then this AI bubble will burst, and with it will burst as well the entire American economy, which is really a financial Ponzi scheme. Right. So that's a dire situation that the Americans are facing right now.
If that sounds ominous, then consider that the US lacks the firepower to reopen the Strait of Hormuz on its own. And then add to that the fact that it's one thing to reopen the strait, but it's another thing altogether in keeping the critical energy corridor open and safe from further Iranian attacks, as explained by distinguished and retired US General H.R. McMaster.
If we were prepared for this, why are we asking Europe and NATO to help us secure the Strait of Hormuz?
Well, you need additional capabilities to sustain that opening. Remember the 1980 to 1988 tanker war. It wasn't just a one and done. So I think what you're going to see, like in the next week or so, Adriana, is a shift in the focus of the combined force on reopening the Straits of Hormuz, targeting anything that could influence the Straits of Hormuz. Then you'll see the proofing of the Straits with U.S. mine-clearing vessels. But you want other vessels to come in as well from Poland, from the UK, Australia, Japan. They're on the way now, but it takes like 30 days, right, to get ships from Europe down into the Straits and integrate them into the task force. So that
Trump has sleepwalked the United States into what's shaping up to be the nation's greatest catastrophe, one that will make the 2003 Iraq invasion and subsequent 2008 financial crash look like a speed bump compared to an avalanche.
It's going to be real shortage. Again, we're talking the biggest supply disruption the world's ever seen. I'm going to even quote Fatih Birol, who said, he's the head of the IEA, who said this is the biggest disruption of both 73 and 79 combined. So he himself says this thing's really big. You can't expect that this is not going to have a physical impact. The physical market is really going to bite sometime in the next couple of weeks.
Operation Blind Fury is now draining the US Treasury of a whopping $1.3 million every minute, having surpassed a $30 billion price tag in the first 22 days. And that was before Trump asked Congress for another $200 billion to fight Israel's criminal war. The Iranian regime has turned an existential threat into an opportunity to systematically bring down Washington, D.C., Tel Aviv, and their Arab Gulf allies, a reality now understood by at least some of America's elected leaders.
I actually don't think any of my Republican colleagues could explain how this war ends. Apparently, a worse regime, more provocative to the region, more adversarial to U.S. interests, will remain in charge of Iran when we decide to stop bombing. Estimates are that they will be able to rebuild their missile and drone capability in months after we declare an end to the hostilities. The nuclear program will still be there because you can't bomb out of existence either knowledge or the fissile material that is buried deep under the earth. So at the end of this, we're going to have raised prices for everybody here. We're going to have cost a lot of American lives. We're going to have set on fire the region. By the way, a new war, already having killed 1,000 people, is breaking out between Israel and Lebanon. And Iran is going to be more dangerous, not less dangerous at the end.
As mentioned earlier, analysts are forecasting the Iran war could cause the United States to collapse within a mere 6 months from now, a forecast predicated on a slew of economic data and warning signs, not least a tsunami-sized wave of war-caused inflation that's literally drowning millions of Americans with unserviceable levels of debt.
Signs are unmistakable. Overgrown lawns, boarded windows, eviction notices taped to front doors. Across the United States, a silent wave is spreading as foreclosures rise once again. From the pandemic-era buying frenzy to today's high mortgage rates, the housing market has shifted with brutal speed. And now, some cities are seeing foreclosure numbers climb to levels not witnessed in more than a decade.
The 30-year mortgage rate just hit 7% and climbing, which means struggling American families who didn't vote for Israel's war of choice are now forced to foot the bill for it. Which is why you're seeing Zionist-friendly media outlets trying to convince millions of now jobless and homeless Americans that it's their patriotic duty to sacrifice and suffer for the state of Israel.
As far as the oil prices, people just need to stop panicking. It's worth it to prevent Iran from having a nuclear weapon. So if I have to pay a little bit more for gas, I'll pay
the price. I mean, in order to have long-term stability.
The disruptions in the global markets are real and may be painful. But the long-term benefits, again, are incalculable.
There may be some sacrifices to be made at the pump on a temporary basis. I'm willing to pay 30% or 30 cents more at the pump to make sure that Iran does not have a nuclear weapon.
To win in life.
It's important to note here that whereas the media is fixated on inflation, oil prices, and stock market indexes, the real story is the sudden and rapid spike in government bond yields. Because when Treasury yields rise, mortgage rates follow, meaning more Americans will soon lose their home due to Israel's criminality and violence. And when yields move straight up like this, as they have since the start of the war, it means investors no longer have confidence in the US government's ability to repay its debts, causing yields to explode higher on already massive debt piles, sending interest payments to spiral out of control. A fate that will eventually destroy the government's ability to fund basic human needs, including Medicare and Social Security, while bringing into view the next great economic depression. Even some of Trump's closest Republican allies are now sounding the alarm.
You posted this tweet just yesterday or earlier today. Our debt is our national security crisis. No foreign army threatens America like our own reckless spending does. Washington refuses to say it. I will. The debt is now over $39 trillion. Is this hopeless?
Well, the thing is the current war makes it worse. We're spending about $1 to $2 billion a day. My prediction is within the next month or two, there'll be a request for a military supplemental.
US government bond yields are rising, at least in part, due to Iran's decision to grant safe passage through the Strait of Hormuz to nations that pay for their oil with the Chinese currency instead of the US dollar. A move that has Trump rightly panicked, given the US-Saudi petrodollar is how the United States gained its status as the global hegemonic power. But for the United States, these good times are now over. Because with one simple move, Iran has pushed the US-Saudi petrodollar towards extinction. Tehran has not only ended the era of American economic warfare, but also it has gained control over world oil and food prices in a mere 22 days. This is real geopolitical power, and Iran won't give it up easily. This is where we are because Biden did nothing to stop Israel committing genocide in Gaza, which in turn emboldened the Zionist regime and Trump to launch a criminal and unjustifiable war against Iran. But even more concerning for the future of the United States is the fact that Trump has lost control of Israel, with Netanyahu telling Israelis that he will continue to attack Iran even if Trump negotiates a peace settlement.
מוקדם יותר היום שוחחתי עם ידידנו הנשיא טראמפ. הנשיא טראמפ מאמין שיש סיכוי למנף את ההישגים הכבירים של צה"ל וצבא ארצות הברית כדי לממש את יעדי המלחמה בהסכם, הסכם שישמור על האינטרסים החיוניים שלנו. במקביל, אנחנו ממשיכים לתקוף גם באיראן וגם בלבנון. אנחנו קודשים את תוכנית הטילים ותוכנית הגרעין עד דק וממשיכים לפגוע קשות בחיזבאללה.
As you can see, there's never been a more important time for Americans to take a stand against Israel, and you can do so by electing anti-Zionist politicians in the coming midterm elections. I urge you to vote like your life depends on it, because in this case, it truly does. And please, do support independent media outlets that challenge Zionist propaganda, including our channel, which was recently demonetized for exposing evidence of Israeli war crimes. Therefore, we kindly ask that you please support our effort to expose and confront the Zionist lobby and other injustices in the Muslim world by becoming a member of our show at patreon.com/
one on the ground. And it seems certain now that the Americans will commit boots on the ground. The Pentagon is deploying an additional 5,000 troops to the Middle East, and Netanyahu has reappeared to say that the war must be won on the ground, not from the air. Trump has asked for $200 billion from Congress, signaling that he intends to fight a long war. Well, we're thrilled now to have here on the show Professor Jiang. He's the author of Predictive History on Substack. Welcome to Redacted. Great to have you here.
Thanks so much, Clayton. I love your show.
Well, it's our pleasure to have you here. So, those are your words just a few days ago on your Substack, as you describe it, the senseless war and committing U.S. boots on the ground. It seems that part of the story is ramping up while we get this rhetoric from the Trump administration that talks have gone great. We're about to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. Nothing to see here. Don't worry about your energy prices. Where do things stand right now, in your estimation?
Right. So Trump, these past 3 weeks have been over the place. Every single day, he comes up with a new narrative. But the reality on the ground is that this war is following an escalation ladder. And it seems that day by day, the escalation is getting worse and worse. So there's fear now that the Israelis will strike the power plants of Iran, which is targeting now the civilian infrastructure of Iran. Iran has stated that in public that if their power plants are attacked, then they will respond by targeting the energy infrastructure of the GCC and possibly the desalination plants as well. And so right now, the GCC, especially the UAE, they're facing an existential crisis. The UAE has doubled down and said that they themselves want to remove the Iranian threat once and for all. And the Israelis are completely committed to the fight. So it seems like all the different actors want this to escalate.
Now, you've become a bit of an internet celebrity because you have this ability to see things at a higher level than the rest of us. So while the rest of us are like, oh, he said this, maybe this is happening. And what about this? What do we think about this? You use game theory to understand it at a broader context, which I have found both comforting and terrifying at the same time. Can you respond to how the internet has responded to you on a personal level, but then also how are people actually then making choices in their lives based on what you say? Because I know for me, it's like, okay, we better, think about what our plans are in our family. We better think about what is our emergency response. And so can you talk about some of the response to you and then also what's practical for the rest of us that are just watching this war in horror?
Yeah, sure. So for the past 2 years, I've been developing a new system of predictive modeling where I take game theory and I make predictions about how world events will turn out. And by making these predictions, I can better refine my game theory model. And so 2 years ago, I made 3 predictions. The first prediction is that Trump would win the 2024 general election, become the 47th president of the United States. Second prediction is that he would initiate a war with Iran. And the third prediction is that the United States would lose this war, and ultimately this would reshape the global order. So I did this as a thought experiment. I'm just a high school teacher in China. I'm trying to get my students excited in learning. I'm trying to increase their critical thinking skills. And I myself am curious about how the world works. So I developed this model, and to my surprise, it's actually panned out. And so I've received a lot of attention online. And there are 2 types of attention. The first is that there seems to be a coordinated smear campaign against me, mainly by individuals who believe that I am maybe attacking Israel or threatening the Zionist project. And so there have been quite a number of very influential media figures that have come out and attacked me. I won't name their names, but everyone knows who they are. And it seems coordinated because it's the same talking points where, they, try to emulate me or try to, satirize me by having a blackboard and then writing down some silly things and saying, hi, there you go. So they're trying to satirize my teaching style. And it all happened at once. So it seems coordinated to me. It's the same talking point where they think that I make up this stuff on the fly. Okay. So that is the smear campaign. But there's also an organic anger directed at me. I think a lot of it is fear about how this war will turn out, and anger at the fact that I'm sort of using a global tragedy, to make a name for myself. And I'm sympathetic towards these people. I mean, there are quite a few people who I deeply admire, people like David Icke. I've been following David Icke for a number of years, and he's been a deep inspiration to me. But he himself has criticized me for maybe being part of the deep state or being part of a conspiracy in order to push an agenda. Again, I'm just a random high school teacher in Beijing. I think a lot of it just comes from the confusion of how I was able to blow up so fast online. I myself am also confused by the attention I've been getting. When I first started this YouTube channel, it was mainly to try to build a online community where I can exchange my ideas with others. And my wife and I were really optimistic about the potential for the YouTube channel. We were really thinking, like, maybe in 2 months' time, or 3 years' time, we would have 5,000 members. And that'd be it, 5,000 members. Now it's over 2 million. So it's I'm just flabbergasted by the attention. And I know that a lot of people who've been working in the space for a number of years, trying to educate and enlighten the public, people like David Icke, but also people like Jay Dyer, they might be confused as to how this happened. I myself am confused as well. So I'm just trying to make sense of what's happening.
But
so to be clear, you're not part of the deep state. You're not part of I've seen some people being critical, saying that he's part of the Chinese Communist Party, and therefore he has an agenda. He's not being critical of China. He's being critical of Israel. What do you say to that?
Okay, first of all, I've been very mute about China. And the reality is that I live and work in China. If I were to say anything offensive about China, then my school would get into a lot of trouble. And quite frankly, they might have to fire me. I have a family in China, I have 3 young kids. So I choose not to say anything offensive about China. Quite honestly, if I had nice things to say about China, I would say them because it would make me look good in China. And quite honestly, I could make quite a a lot of money for myself if I became a fanboy of the Communist Party in China and parroted, Communist Party talking points around the world. So, but I don't want to do that because I don't want to be a propagandist. I want to be an educator. So I've chosen to remain silent about China. So I think like the criticism of me about being mute in my criticism of the Chinese Communist Party is correct, but it's just because I'm working in the reality that is China. Okay.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. And yeah, I wanted to thank you for Natalie for bringing that up. And we wanted to address that kind of off the top, because I know you've been getting hit really hard with certain people on social media. So thank you for that. Can we talk about your predictive model though? I want to get back to this war and what you're seeing play out here. I mean, forget like internet personalities, criticize. I want to talk about there's thousands of people being killed in a war that is reshaping the global world order right now.
And if I may, I'd like to add this because we also are parents of 3. And when I watch your content, it seems very much not about what you want to happen, because we also have 3 kids. This is not the world we want to leave them. You've said many times, I hope that I'm wrong. So I don't hear in your predictions a personal preference or a deep satisfaction of evil or anything. I mean, I feel kindred of the way we report news. We don't like this. We don't want it to be this way. But if you could tell us, give it to us straight how you see it, and we'll put aside how we feel about what we want to happen.
Yeah, so thank you so much for that, Natalie. So, when my predictions turn out correct, on February 28th, the Americans and Israelis attacked Tehran, and this launched the war that we are in now. I couldn't sleep for 2 weeks. My prediction had panned out, but I was angry, I was frustrated, I was anxious, because as you point out, I have 3 kids and I want a better future for them. But as a parent, I also have a responsibility to be truthful to them and to work hard to build a better future. So my hope is that if this predictive model is correct and people start to adopt this predictive model, then that gives us more agency over human events. And this allows our children to build a better world. And that's what drives me, my love for my children, my desire to bequest to them a better world that they have agency over. So, we have 8 billion people in this world, and most people don't know what's going on. And they choose to put their head in the sand. And what I'm trying to do with my YouTube channel is trying to say to people that you do matter, and your choices will affect the outcome of the world. And so we need to educate ourselves. We need to focus on what we can do. And just by doing these 2 simple things, we can change the world for the better. So that's what motivates me. So as for my predictive model, I use 3 mechanisms, okay? So the first is game theory. And the idea of game theory is I assume that you have these different players in the world. So United States, Israel, Iran, Saudi Arabia, UAE, and they have different interests and they have different strengths. And they are going to look for an optimal strategy in order to advance their interests. So as we know, a lot of what's happening in the Middle East is driven by Israel's desire to achieve the Greater Israel Project. Right now, Israel is being dominated by religious fanatics who believe that it is their God-given right to control all the land from the Nile to the Euphrates. And that's why we're seeing this war in the Middle East. And because of Israel's aggression, Iran has to respond a certain way. The United States is drawn into this war, and the United States is drawn in, and the United States has to respond in a certain way. So that's game theory. The problem with game theory is often you're not allowed information, or you don't have access to information of the key players. You don't know how they're thinking. You just make assumptions. So you need other mechanisms in order to validate your theory. And these 2 other mechanisms are historical patterns and eschatology. Okay, historical patterns just means can we think about previous wars and contrast how this war will play out based on previous wars. And so what I've done is I've looked at the Vietnam War. I've looked at the Peloponnesian War, where Athens invaded Sicily. I've looked at the Nazi Germany invasion of Russia. And by looking at these wars, I'm able to figure out how this war might progress. And the third mechanism is eschatology, which is to say that the people involved, whether it's Iranians or the Israelis or the Americans, these are very religious people who believe that They're doing this for God. They're doing this to build a better world. And so once you understand their eschatology, once you understand the religious worldview, you can better understand their motivations and their strategy moving forward. So then you have like three different strands, right? You have game theory, eschatology, and historical patterning. And if you're able to figure out where these three converge together, you are then able to make accurate predictions about how things should progress.
Now, you've said Iran's edge in all of this, I believe, and if I'm misquoting you, please forgive me, is escalation control. So we're talking about the escalation ladder. Maybe you can lay that out, because I think it's very, when people see that ladder, the escalation war ladder, we've seen it all before. We've seen it play out in Iraq. We've seen it play out in Afghanistan. And I saw a meme this weekend where someone said, Clayton, the problem with 3-day wars is that they tend to last 5 years. And I thought that just really hit it. So anyway, you make the point that Iran has been able to control the escalation control. What exactly does that mean in terms of the United States and Israel's plan to actually escalate this war?
Right. So the escalation ladder is just the idea that once you start a fight, it develops its own momentum, its own logic. You can't really stop it. So no two guys go into an argument thinking that they'll actually exchange punches. But what happens is they argue, then they get emotional, they push each other, then they hit each other, pull a knife, then they pull a gun, okay? So this is the idea of escalation ladder. Now, according to this theory, the United States and Israel have escalation dominance because they can move up far higher than Iran in the escalation ladder, because the United States and Israel have access to nuclear weapons, right? And Iran doesn't. So in theory, the United States and Israel have more options than Iran. But if you've ever been in a fight, what you recognize is that the weaker opponent is forced to be more strategic, to be much more flexible, to have more control over the situation. So I did a lot of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu before. And in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, it's all about maintaining calm, maintaining control. And if you are able to maintain calm control, you can even defeat a bigger opponent who are stronger and heavier than you are. So what we're seeing in this war is the Iranians are able to calibrate their strategy far more effectively than the Israelis and the Americans. The Americans use something called a shock and awe strategy, where they go and blow things up, right? So the Israelis, if they want to assassinate the Ayatollah Khamenei or Ali Larijani, what they do is blow up 10 blocks, okay? It's devastating, but it's effective, it's blunt. The Iranians, on the other hand, are able to calibrate their strikes. So like if they're able to target perhaps a military base in Bahrain, they're able to target Mossad Center in Israel. And so by doing that, what Iran is able to demonstrate is confidence in its arsenal. It's able to maintain diplomacy, political diplomacy, as well as global public opinion. They're also able to divide and conquer the allies, right? So they don't want the entire GCC teaming up with Israel and the United States. So they just want to target specific areas. So for example, military bases. They don't actually want to target energy infrastructure, because then that might cause Saudi Arabia to declare war on Iran. So what we're seeing for these past few weeks is, whereas Israel and the United States are choosing a blunt instrument, shock and awe, just blow things up, the Iranians are being very strategic. They're being very calculating. Another example, of course, is the Strait of Hormuz, where Iran is able to determine who's able to pass through the Strait of Hormuz, therefore not impacting the global economy as much as I could.
Now, what's frustrating for me is that the United States and Israel can escalate in these horrific ways, and there's no international consequences. So they can destroy Gaza en masse. They can hit a school of young girls, and there's no consequence for it. So as an American, it's infuriating, because there should be some consequences so that we never do this again. And the world is letting us, and I'm very confused why that is. So can you explain that variable in your game theory?
Right. So there is actually a major consequence. A major consequence is the morale of your population, which affects your will to fight, right? So if people believe that it is a good cause, they are willing to commit themselves to the fight. They're willing to make the sacrifices necessary to win the war, right? So we're seeing is, look, these soldiers, these American soldiers, are not enthusiastic about this war. There were these American commanders who told their soldiers that this war against Iran is because God ordained Trump to achieve the second coming of Jesus. And what you had was dozens of complaints filed against these commanders. You're seeing fires break out in Gerald R. Ford supercarrier, right? So Gerald R. Ford supercarrier came into the theater hoping to have a major impact, and then a fire broke out, and then the Gerald Ford is now forced to retreat back into the Mediterranean. And apparently, the rumor is the Gerald Ford is now out of commission for the next 2 years because the damage was so extensive. And the theory is there's an investigation as to whether the sailor deliberately set fire in a laundry room to decapitate the supercarrier. Okay, so you're seeing low morale among American soldiers. First day of the war, what happened? All the American soldiers changed into civilian clothes and then fled into hotels. Popular opinion in America, only about 40% of the population support this war. And this is the lowest support in the past 20, 30 years. So the consequence of not having a strategy, of not having a purpose, of not having a rationale means low morale among your population. And this is important because eventually, if Trump wants to win this war, he needs a ground invasion. And already we're seeing 5,000 additional troops being deployed to the Persian Gulf. And a lot of people assume they're planning an amphibious landing somewhere, possibly Kark Island, but also possibly a naval base in the southeast of Iran. Once you commit the ground invasion, then you're going to have a popular uprising throughout America. You know, once you have this social media footage of Marines getting killed in Iran for no particular reason, I mean, Americans don't want to die for Epstein or Israel, right? So there's a tremendous consequence to what the Americans are doing right now.
Let's talk about this air power, because you've been critical of, I think you've referred to it as the inverted pyramid, where the United States really relies on air power more than anything, whether it's drones, whether it's air, with fighter jets. But Iran, as Netanyahu has said, will need to have boots on the ground in order for there to be an effective regime change. So these seem at really at cross purposes. And then you mentioned 5,000 Marines there's a really massive buildup now of U.S. forces heading to that region. It seems inevitable. I hate to say it, but it seems inevitable.
Right. So if you want to win this war, what you do is you spend 2 years to stage 2 million troops around Iran. Okay. So you have 500,000 troops in Pakistan ready to assault from the southeast corner. You have another million in Iraq coming from that border. And then you have another 500,000 maybe in Azerbaijan coming in from the north. Okay, you need about 2 years because you need to stockpile ammunition to train the soldiers to have the order of battle ready. Okay, if you want to win a war, you actually do it that way. The problem is that America has not fought a real war ever since Vietnam. 2003, the war against Iraq was not a real war because Saddam Hussein didn't have any air defense. He basically gave up even before the war began because he assumed that Americans would not be stupid enough to invade Iraq because that would make Iran the regional power, right? Because Iraq was a balance to Iran. So Saddam Hussein miscalculated. So the problem with the American military machine is that it's run by the military-industrial complex. And this is something that Eisenhower warned about in his farewell speech, right, where he said that there's now this massive military bureaucracy that is independent of oversight, that does not factor in the best interests of the nation, that doesn't really care about popular opinion. And all they're interested in is creating as many advanced weapon systems as possible in order to basically steal from the American taxpayer. And then starting these wars for no particular reason. You know, Julian Assange said it best, where the point of the war on terror is not to have successful wars, but to have never-ending wars where the military-industrial complex can steal as much as it wants from the American taxpayer. And so what we're seeing in Iran is the failure of the military-industrial complex to prepare for a modern war where your opponent is willing to fight back asymmetrically, right? So we see these air defense systems, the Patriot system, the THAAD system. They don't really work. Even Israel's vaunted Iron Dome system, Sling David, they don't work either. The Iranians now have are now able to strike at will against Tel Aviv. So air defense doesn't really work. Then you have these super carriers, Abraham Lincoln, Gerald Ford. Gerald Ford cost $13 billion. And when they came into theater, they recognized that, wow, we could be hit by drones and missiles. So they ran away. They're not actually in this war. I mean, they're just flexing. And then you have these jets like the F-35. The F-35 cost $100 million each. It took about 26 years to develop. And it had stealth technology. This is the most advanced jet in the entire world.
Yeah, we were told it was unhittable. Unhittable.
Yes, exactly. And the Iranians hit them with like pretty limited radar. So it just shows you the corruption of the military-industrial complex right now in the United States. And it shows you how the United States is not ready for this war at all.
Let's take a quick break. And then I want to ask you more about game theory in specific, your prediction about the United States eventually losing this war. So we'll be back in just a moment. You may have seen so many allies of the Trump campaign, such as Tulsi Gabbard, were against the war with Iran, and why you think the United States would lose it, why you knew that before the president ever did.
Right. So the key piece of evidence is 20 years ago, about 2002, the American military, the Pentagon, ran a war game called the Millennium Challenge, And the idea is to look at how America could defeat Iran in a war. And so what they did was they asked this admiral to fight on the side of Iranians, and asked this admiral to figure out a strategy that could defeat the invincible American empire. And so in the first iteration, what the admiral did was he used drone swarms, okay? So these are cheap, drones that attack all at once, and it overwhelms the defense systems of the carriers and the destroyers. And in this iteration, the Iranians won. And so they ran this multiple times until finally what happened was the Pentagon basically restricted the strategy of the Iranians. Basically say, you can't use drones, you can't fight back, you can't cheat, you can't fight asymmetrically. And then in that iteration, in the final iteration, the Pentagon won, okay? So this shows you two things. The first thing is that the Pentagon is not ready to fight a war asymmetrically. It doesn't have the creativity, it doesn't have the resilience, it doesn't have the flexibility. The second thing is the Pentagon has become this bureaucracy where it doesn't really want bad news. It doesn't want to admit its limitations. And so it's going to shape reality in a way that conforms to its expectations. And so that's one piece of evidence. Another piece of evidence is Operation Prosperity Guardian, where the Houthis, in response to the genocide in Gaza, was disrupting Red Sea shipping. And so the Americans sent this massive naval armada to stop the Houthis, right? I'm sure you've seen this video footage of like this massive armada. And it didn't do anything. Yeah. They kept on hitting the Houthis. The Houthis hid in their mountains, and the Houthis refused to surrender. And the Americans didn't know what to do because they're so used to being able to scare their opponents, to bribe them, to intimidate them, to co-opt them, to assassinate them. And the Houthis were, refused to surrender. They were not afraid to die, and they could not be blackmailed. And so what happened was the Americans were forced to retreat. Now, I saw a YouTube video where these different admirals got together and discussed Operation Prosperity Guardian. And basically, to put it in very simply, what they said was, we lost against the Houthis. We made a lot of mistakes, but we don't know how to beat them. But if you ask us to do it again, we'll use the same strategy because we don't know what else to do. Right. Okay. That's basically the Pentagon. And so we're seeing this play out right now in Iran, where these strategies don't really work. These past 3 weeks have shown shock and awe doesn't really work, but they don't know what else to do. So they keep on doing it. And now what they're doing is they're thinking about sending the Marines in for an amphibious landing because that's just what you do, even though every military analyst you talk to will tell you that this is a suicide mission. But unfortunately, once you commit to a war, the war achieves a momentum and a logic of its own. And this is what happened in Vietnam, where in 1965, 1966, the Americans basically knew they could not defeat this insurgency in South Vietnam, but they didn't want to give up because of credibility or face, right? They don't want to look bad in front of the world. And so we're seeing a similar situation where if the Americans were to retreat, well, I mean, the entire world would just laugh at Trump. I mean, the entire world would no longer see America as a empire, as invincible. And the Pentagon could not really countenance this possibility. So what they'll do is they'll double down. It's very much like going to a casino, losing $1 million, and then you're stuck. It's a sunk cost fallacy where, you either stay and try to gamble back your money, or you go home and like have to tell your wife what happened, right?
Can I just stay on this issue of morale before you change the subject? One more question about that, because it feels like it doesn't matter that we're all so upset about the war, but you're saying it does. But on the other side, many Arab countries do have something to fight for, specifically the Palestinians, specifically the Iranians. Living as a Palestinian in Gaza under constant surveillance, where the Israelis can kill you and rape you at will, lock you in Gaza. You're waiting decades for a right of return and living in utter poverty and misery. To them, the stakes are utterly existential. So anyone aligned with them has nothing to lose. So they do have moral support, whereas the rest of us don't. Can you explain how that plays into their, because if they lose, they're all wiped out. There's nothing. I mean, I just finished Ramzi Baroud's book over the weekend, and the way that the Palestinians in Gaza have been living for decades is horrific. And those are stories that are not told to us, but it's very motivating to them.
Yeah, look, I think that the Iranians have extremely high morale. And the reason why is they think they are on the side of truth. What people forget of the Iranians is that these are the Persians, and the Persians have around for about 3,000 years. And the Persians were originally Zoroastrians. And Zoroastrians were the first eschatological people in that they believed that they are here to serve the will of God and to bring about a just world. And so they believed, like, if you live a life of truth, if you fight for what is good, then you make the world a better place. And, and that's why the Iranians refuse to do a preemptive strike. There are a lot of people telling Iranians, you know what, the Americans are going to come anyway, the Israelis are going to come anyway, take the initiative, set the contours of this war. But the Persian people are like, no, we have to live the truth. We refuse to submit to the lie. So if they attack us, we'll fight back. But we will never, ever be the aggressor. We will never, ever choose the path of violence. We choose the path of right. And, when you do that, when you submit yourself to the will of God, when you commit yourself to righteousness, there's an inner fire in you that allows you to surmount all obstacles, that gives you faith in the most darkest times. And you can see that in Iran, where, they're being devastated. In the first week, they really struck an oil depot in Tehran, and so the entire sky was black. But inside, there's a light shining in the Iranian people. And that's what happens when you fight a war for a good cause as opposed to a bad cause.
You brought up David Icke earlier, and we're big fans of David Icke here on this show. He's been a guest a number of times. One of the things that he's been saying is that this Iranian war, this collapse of Iran, et cetera, has been planned for a long time. I mean, this is many, many decades. As you pointed out, the war games that they were playing at the Pentagon many decades ago. But this is all part of a plan, a broader plan. And his argument is, of course, that Trump is just like a pawn in this cultist's chessboard, ushering in this new era of AI and control. And we will lose more rights. I mean, I just did a video this weekend about this very same thing, this idea that they will take away our control. They will take away our ability to transact. AI will have, this biological connection now to the human brain. They are ushering in this new era of control, just like the Patriot Act. So we can get all into the finite details about air power and this drone struck this particular oil plant and this, but really it's part of a larger game. Do you see it that way?
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with David Icke's assessment. I think this is the future we're heading towards. My main issue with David Icke is that he thinks this is all deliberate, this is all scripted, this is all planned. And it's true that certain people have planned this out. These are occultists. These are people who have been studying Kabbalah and meditating on the state of the world for many, many decades. And they have foreseen these events turn out. But to say that this is all scripted really doesn't take into account the agency of certain individuals. So to say like this will ultimately lead to a certain series of events, I agree with. I think this will lead to digital currency. I think this will lead to an AI surveillance control grid. I think this will lead to a collapse of the global economy. I think this will lead to a reset. I think this will lead to the Greater Israel Project. So on where the world is heading, I agree with David Icke, but I will also point out that according to game theory, we cannot discount certain players in this game. So for example, Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin are major players in this game, and their interests are not actually aligned with the interests of the global elite. Yes, the global elite has a certain plan for us, and this war is meant to achieve this plan, but Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump may have other plans as well. And what we're seeing is really the script being played out, but also a response to this script. So I don't think things will work out as seamlessly as people predict.
Yeah, no, I see what you mean, and I think you're spot on with that, because there are individual players in this that have agency and can manipulate. There is a broader framework, whatever you want to call it, this 2030 agenda more broadly, control grid, et cetera, digital currency. They want massive control of all of us. And really COVID-19, of course, was the trial run to see how far they could push us into these lockdowns. Do you believe that we are heading into a massive energy lockdown, the likes of which we've never seen before, even eclipsing what we saw with COVID-19? You're already seeing, obviously, in Southeast Asia. You talked about Thailand in your interview with Tucker. Thailand already on fuel restrictions and telling people to stay home. They've, I think, declared a state of emergency. Vietnam and other countries as well. So do you think we are heading for a massive lockdown?
I actually think the real issue that the global elite need to resolve is the financial system. Meaning that over the past 10, 20 years, they printed too much money. And there are too many individuals who are millionaires. And this is causing a lot of problems for the global economy. And so what you need to do is basically destroy a lot of this wealth. And there are different options that you can use to destroy this wealth. A civil war in America would do it. A false flag attack on financial data centers where a lot of wealth is wiped out will also work. And then you can blame this false flag on Iran and therefore muster public support for a national draft. So I think like their priority is not necessarily to lock the country down, but to try to destroy as much excess wealth as possible from the system in order to better regulate individuals.
That's terrifying. I mean, yeah, maybe not the lockdown in the COVID sense of the term, but locking us down financially by wiping out huge stores of value. That's absolutely terrifying.
Yes. I do want to talk about these dark forces a little bit more, because the Epstein class is clearly a real thing. And how much of the Epstein class do you think is just that they're satanic perverts doing things for their own satisfaction, and that it does promote a war? Is it a chess piece to move around? I have you as someone who eats babies, therefore you must give me the war that I wanted. What do you think of that? Because you talk a lot about the Epstein class. Was it real in the way that most of us see now from the public documents? What have we not seen? And how is it operating still? Because it clearly didn't die with Epstein.
Yeah, so the Epstein class, I think people focus on the wrong thing, which is they focus on Pizzagate, right? They focus on the idea that Epstein was talking about like beef jerky, pizza, and grape soda. And that's what captivates the people's imagination. But I think that's not really the point, okay? And what I mean by that is we think that, Jeffrey Epstein was running a blackmail operation and using Epstein Island in order to gather compromising material on powerful individuals like Bill Clinton and Bill Gates. I think Epstein Island was just a weekend getaway. It's just what he did for fun. If you actually look at the Epstein files and you track what he was doing, well, he was basically an operative for the global elite and trying to manufacture geopolitical events in a certain way that most benefited the global elite, right? So he was involved in the great financial crisis of 2008. He was probably involved in 9/11, even though we don't have the emails that confirm this. But a lot of, if you just connect the dots, it suggests that he was in certain way involved in 9/11. He was a neighbor to Howard Lutnick in Manhattan, right? So, and they were neighbors, and their numbers were 9 and 11. So is this all coincidence? I mean, I don't know. But so what I will say is this: if you just look at the Epstein files and you try to reconstruct how he was making his money and what his real job was, well, he was mainly engaged in arms trafficking, money laundering, and geopolitical manipulation, and so he was basically an operative. And the money was just something that he did. I mean, it was not a concern. I mean, think about this, where Bill Gates and Reid Hoffman, these are billionaires. When they were asked, why do you associate with Epstein? And their response was, well, we wanted money from him, right? So these are billionaires trying to beg Epstein for money. So something's wrong with our current conception of the world. And so what I will say is there is a transnational elite that is above the nation state that is able to manipulate the nation state. And this transnational elite is able to manipulate geopolitical events in a certain way that maximizes their benefit, okay? And we can speculate as to who this transnational elite are. But I would say that they are an alliance between three forces, okay? These three forces are transnational capital, City of London, Wall Street, secret societies, Jesuits, Shabbat Lubavitch, Sabbatean Frankists, Freemasons, Rosicrucians. And then you have these elite families called the 13 families that apparently control the world, okay? So I would say Epstein was one of these people from an elite family. And if you look at his emails, what he will say is there were three major Jewish families in Europe. They were the Rothschilds, the Epsteins, and the Gutmans. And he told Peter Thiel, I represent the Rothschilds. And what he's really saying is, I represent a collection of transnational capital that is able to influence geopolitical events. So I think that is what the Epstein class is. The Epstein class are parasites on the nation state, and they manipulate geopolitical events in a certain way that most benefits them.
Joe Kent last week, I think it was last week now, time is flying so quickly, resigned from the Trump administration, basically trying to prevent this war in Iran. He says that all of the intelligence agencies have confirmed that Iran did not have nuclear ambitions. They were not building nuclear weapons. President Trump, just on Monday, comes out and says, the whole reason we're having these negotiations, no more wars, and we will not allow Iran to get those nuclear weapons. So there seems to be this massive disconnect. Joe Kent posted this, and I just want to read it to you. He said, step one in de-escalation must be restraining the Israelis. Otherwise, all efforts to negotiate will follow this pattern. Well, President of the United States will announce a de-escalation, and then Israel launches some major attack on oil infrastructure or desalination plants. And that's what we've seen now repeatedly in these past few weeks, is that the United States says one thing, and then the Israelis go around quickly and launch some sort of attack on Iranian infrastructure, like you mentioned, the oil and the black cloud hanging over Tehran. So do you agree with Joe Kent that the only way to de-escalate is to rein in the Israelis?
I completely agree with this assessment. So in the early days of the war, on the first day, a drone struck the Saudi Aramco facility in Saudi Arabia. And we assumed at first that was Iranians, but later it was reported that actually this drone was coming in from Lebanon. So the Iranians launched a drone from Lebanon, right? So people speculate that this was an Israeli false flag to force Saudi Arabia into the war as quickly as possible. Tucker Carlson himself reported that he was told by confidential sources that the Qataris had arrested 2 Mossad agents who they suspected of sabotaging, of doing a sabotage operation in Qatar. Later, the Qataris denied this, but this fits very much the Mossad MO. Recently, there was a long-range missile strike on Diego Garcia. And at first, people were bewildered because we just assumed this was beyond the range of Iran's ballistic missiles. But now it's been reported that actually these missiles were fired from an Israeli submarine. So it is in the best interest, according to game theory, for Israel to drag this war out as much as possible, and to drag in as many players as possible. Ideally, Israel also wants to drag in Saudi Arabia, UAE, Turkey, and Pakistan as well, because from their perspective, this war is the best opportunity they have to achieve the Greater Israel Project. If they destroy the GCC, if they destroy Iran, then they are the only regional power left standing, and that is their ambition. But also, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, but I will also add some nuance to this, where the Iranians do not actually want this war to end as well, because for the past few decades they've been under tremendous sanctions, and they want sanctions relief. And they recognize that if they are to rebuild and modernize and further protect themselves, they need to accomplish certain things. The first thing they need to do is establish control over the Strait of Hormuz. And that would be the main economic lifeline, where they can charge a 10% toll on any passage through the Strait of Hormuz. So that's number one. Number two is they need to eliminate the American military presence in the GCC. So they need to America out of the Middle East. The third thing they need to do is establish credibility, meaning they need to do enough damage to Israel so that Israel will be forced to be respectful towards Iran, and then Israel and Iran can come to a peace treaty once the United States leaves. So that's really the long-term ambition of Iran as well.
Is that doable? That Israel will ever submit to the greater good of other countries?
Right. So if you look at the Greater Israel Project, it's very clear that it extends from the Nile to the Euphrates. It does not include Persia. Israel is not actually interested in Persia. So according to game theory, what Israel wants to do is knock out both the GCC and the United States. So people don't really understand this, where people think that Israel's main objective is to knock out Iran. No, actually, Israel sees America as the main threat. There's a video, a viral video of Netanyahu, and a journalist asked him, "What book are you reading right now, Mr. Netanyahu?" Netanyahu responds, "I'm reading a book called Rome versus the Jews by Barry Strauss. And the book is about these 3 wars fought between the Romans and the Jews in the 1st century. And these were like brutal wars that wiped out most of the Jewish population in Europe at that time." And so the journalist then asked Netanyahu, "Why are you reading this book?" And Netanyahu's response was, "Well, it didn't work out great for us the first time." Okay, so this is how the Israelis think. They understand like their main competitor in the Middle East is actually not Iran, but actually the United States. So this war is meant to actually destroy the American military presence in the Middle East.
Sit on that for,
it's very much like Game of Thrones. I keep mentioning there's this Littlefinger character who is befriending these leaders and then leading them and advising them into their own self-destruction. If you know Game of Thrones, that would make sense. And so I guess my question is, and it's not, the people of Israel, it's the leaders of Israel who want this. These are, in my estimation, the bad guys. Is there any scenario in your game theory where the bad guys are punished and stop it? I know that's simplistic, but it's like what I pray for.
Look, there's a lot of agency, and Donald Trump could have come to Jesus moment, and he strikes a deal with the Iranians, and he restricts the Israelis, right? So Donald Trump says, for the greater good, I'm going to strike a deal with the GCC and Iran, and we're going to limit Israel. Now, Israel has nuclear weapons, so you can't attack Israel. But what the United States can do is we're going to pass laws that say you cannot be a dual citizen and sit in the U.S. Congress. You cannot be a dual citizen and work in the national security apparatus of America. And we're not going to sell weapons to Israel, and we're not going to finance the military activities of Israel. I mean, the reality is the Israelis have free healthcare, and a lot of this is being financed by Americans who do not have free healthcare, by the way.
Yeah, we know this.
Yeah, exactly. And they have a space program. Like, why are we propping up a country that has a space program?
Right. It's incredibly frustrating because federal workers are not being paid at the airports. We, just traveled this weekend and we walked through it, and it's heartbreaking to watch these people go without paychecks and know that we're spending all this money to bomb Iran. It's really hard to take.
So, Professor, we're going to take a quick break and we're going to come back. We want to ask you about your next big prediction and also about something you said last week, which is that this war powers we could be entering into with President Trump could even lead to a potential Trump third term. We'll talk about all of that in a moment. But first, or now, and things have changed, I'm sure, since the first 3.5 weeks of this thing. Where are you seeing your predictions pointing over the next month, maybe year or so? Are there any predictions that you'd want to reveal here on our show?
Yeah, so I will say that I think this war is heading in the direction of another Vietnam, meaning that in 1965, the Americans sent in about 3,000 Marines in an expeditionary unit to control Da Nang Air Base. And this was a limited operation with a limited military objective. And then like 4 or 5 years later, you have 500,000 troops in Vietnam. And so we can see a similar situation play out in Iran, where the Americans deployed the Marines in a limited operation, possibly to secure a coastline, possibly to take Kharg Island. We don't know yet. But then this will lead to escalation because of some cost fallacy and mission creep, where the military is set up so that it wants to win a war. And once it gets in a fight, it's not going to stop until it wins the war. And that's what happened in Vietnam. So once these troops are sent, no matter what happens, whether or not they are successful in the first strike or not successful, the Pentagon wants to finish the job, basically. And there'll be a lot of pressure from the military on Donald Trump to institute a national draft. And so I think he will have no choice in the matter, but institute a national draft, in which case you will have riots throughout America. And they have a plan for that, right? They want to deploy the National Guard across all major American cities by as early as April. And once that is in place, once the National Guard is in place, then Trump can declare the Emergency Powers Act, right? And then he will get his third term, and as well as bypass the midterm elections in November.
So a third term without an election, sort of like Zelensky, basically.
Well, right. I mean, he already has a war without congressional declaration. And so, again, I come back to, we have rules and orders, and all of them are just being steamrolled right now. That it doesn't, and you can hear my despair in the fact that it feels like you're not supposed to attack civilian living infrastructure. Oh, we did that. You're not supposed to attack civilians. Yes, we did that. You're not supposed to level a whole society in Gaza. Yeah, we did that too. You're not supposed to have a war without congressional approval. You're not, I don't know what to do here, right? The fact that the rules don't matter, and yet you can still see what's being played out in a game when there's no rules.
Right. So I think it's very worrying that this war was started in a way that was not the way the war started in 2003. So in 2003, the Bush administration spent months rallying public support. They wanted congressional approval. They spoke before the United Nations and provided specious evidence of weapons of mass destruction, but they provided evidence nonetheless. Okay, so the American government in 2003 made tremendous efforts to win over the American public, to seek congressional approval, and to also win public opinion, okay, to speak before the United Nations. None of this is true today. The Trump administration went in, and even today, they have not provided actually a reason why they made the first strike. Trump has said that, well, it was because he was misled by his advisor, Steve Witkoff, Jared Kushner, Peter Hegseth. And then Marco Rubio has said that, Well, it's because the Israelis were going to attack first, and then the Iranians were going to respond by attacking us, and so we have to preempt the Israelis.
Well,
I mean, I normally wouldn't want to point out The Economist magazine, Professor. I'm not a fan of that liberal rag normally, but at the airport, just reading the front cover, I think the headline, the front cover of The Economist magazine this past week is "A War with No Plan." And I think you just hit the nail on the head. I mean, what is the plan here? Is there a plan? Do you see that there is an end game? Because people are asking, what's the goal here? Well,
And
we're
if I
hearing
may-
nuclear, no more nuclear weapons. Well, they never had nuclear weapons. They weren't building nuclear weapons. It's to help the Iranian people. So you help the Iranian people by killing their children and bombing their oil and desalinization infrastructure. Like, none of it makes sense. Do you see any of it making sense?
But let me just point out, having that within weeks of the start of the war is something different. We had to wait years in the Iraq war to get this kind of narrative. We can at least have it from strike one. So there's my, I've been so pessimistic this whole interview. So I wanted to point out that I can see silver linings.
Look, I mean, if you just look at America's history in the Middle East for the past 20 years, what they did in Iraq, what they did in Libya and Syria, I think there is a plan. The plan is to balkanize Iran into ethnic enclaves and destroy Iran's limited water infrastructure, basically destroy the reservoirs, the power plants, and have these different ethnic groups fight over water for the next few decades. It's really to destroy Persia as a civilization. And that's exactly what they did in Iraq. So remember, in 2003, the war was won very quickly. And then Paul Bremer was appointed to oversee the transition. And the second act, the second thing he did was something called the De-Ba'athification Act, which said that if you were a member of the Ba'athist Party, you were not allowed to work in government, you were not allowed to work in the military, you were not allowed to work in the police. The problem with that is that everyone who worked in government, everyone who worked in the military, everyone who worked in the police was a member of the Ba'athist Party. And so with that one order, it destroyed the nation state of Iraq. It destroyed the government of Iraq and its ability to deliver basic services to the Iraqi people. And this led to massive sectarian violence that's still raging today in Iraq. So I think that's the end goal in Iran, to do in Iran what they did in Iraq and Libya and Syria. But they can't come out and say this because the entire world would be disgusted with this plan.
I guess we'll get you out of here on this, Professor. We haven't really talked about the media propaganda piece of all of this, which is really ramped into overdrive. You heard over the past few days, the same publications that were telling us in the Ukraine war that Russia had run out of ballistic missiles is the same media that's now telling us that Iran has run out of ballistic missiles, and they are being hindered and they're being shattered. And, this will wrap up very, very soon. How do you, when you analyze the media propaganda arm of all of this, how do you see it unfolding?
Right. So I think you're exactly correct in that the media will just be as propagandistic in this war against Iran as it was against Ukraine. So the problem with this, though, is unfortunately, Washington, D.C. has become an insular bubble. And so if you are negative, if you voice any dissent, if you're critical like Joe Kent, well, you're pushed out of the bubble very quickly. And so basically everyone in Washington, D.C. is drinking their own Kool-Aid, getting high on their own supply. And this is very problematic because it will lead to bad decision-making. And this is what we saw in Ukraine, where it was, it was suicidal for Ukraine to launch counteroffensive against a heavily fortified Russian position. And by launching 3 counteroffensive that led nowhere, that accomplished no military objectives, the Ukrainians lost over about 1 million men of fighting age. But unfortunately, because the deep state, because Washington, D.C. is able to control the media narrative, people aren't aware of this. And so this war in Ukraine is dragging on for no particular reason, even though it's led to the destruction of Ukraine as a nation state, and even though this war is not winnable. And we can see a similar situation in Iran, where the war is being lost, where it's clear that the Iranians refuse to give up and they have clear escalation control. But Donald Trump is watching Fox News and he's watching, NBC and CNN and CBS News, and they're telling him exactly what he wants to hear, which is this war is going great. The Iranian people love you. The Iranian people want democratic change. And one more day, and we've got this. The Iranians are so close to collapse, and we just fight on for one more week. We've got this. And then like 5 years later, we're still at the stupid war.
Well, Professor, thank you for staying awake for us and joining us on this show. I know the time zones are really.
Sorry. Before we end, I just want to give a quick shout out to Tucker Carlson, okay? Because people don't remember this, but we could have been in this situation in January 2020, because that's when Trump ordered the assassination of General Qasem Soleimani in Baghdad. And this was clearly an act of war. And it seemed as though the Americans were going to follow us up with airstrikes against Iran. So we should have been in this situation in January. But what happened was Tucker Carlson on Fox News, using his huge platform, every day he explained why this war would be a disaster for America. I think he even flew down to Mar-a-Lago to talk to Trump personally, okay? But Tucker Carlson saved us from nuclear war in January 2020. And for that was fired from Fox News. And people don't remember what a heroic act that was, because he's the only broadcaster in a major platform that came out to speak out against the war.
At great personal risk. Yes, he continues to do that at great personal risk. So
yes.
And then speaking out against the Ukraine war and the United States involvement in that, that's why, yes, that's why he got fired from Fox News. Clearly, Professor. Yeah, 100%. One of the few voices on national television who was calling out these neocons and this boondoggle that would have been a disaster for the United States. So thank you for that. Professor.
I got you, Carl. I got mine. My son, my daughter is right here. She's in and out of the door. So if you hear the door creaking or whatever, she's in and out. Because my wife works overnight. She's a nurse, so she works overnight. So my daughter is in and out. So anyway, everybody, thanks for joining us. Shout out to Blue Pill Diary. Shout out to Flying Crocodiles 4630.
Congress has authorization for war. When was the last time the Congress issued a declaration of war? As far as I remember, I do not remember any time the U.S. Congress has, as long as I've been alive, I don't remember any time the U.S. Congress has issued a declaration of war. But U.S. was in Vietnam, U.S. was in Afghanistan, Iraq, and now Iran. Again, this is illegal under the U.S. Constitution. But who cares about Constitution, right? We have the Epstein regime to protect here. That's the most important thing. And let's remember, this is essentially a Pearl Harbor style attack. United States was engaged in negotiation with Iran over Iran's nuclear armament. And now, according to the various diplomatic leaks, both from the foreign ministry of Oman and foreign diplomats involved, they all confirmed that Iran basically accepted all the terms issued by the Trump administration. They even proposed that Iran will give up its nuclear material, to allow U.S. to come in and take all the nuclear material away from Iran to guarantee that Iran will not have a nuclear weapon program. Right after that agreement, U.S. bombed Iran, took out its senior leader. I mean, this is a Pearl Harbor style sneak attack during negotiations. This is exactly what Japanese did on December 7th, 1941. And for Iran, this is 9/11 and Pearl Harbor all roll into one. You know, when 9/11 happened, the United States went insane, went on a rampage all throughout West Asia. And what they're doing to capital Iran, Tehran right now is 10 times worse than 9/11. They're bombing schools, killing hundreds of school children, schoolgirls. So yeah, there's nothing under international law that can justify it. And Trump fully knows it, but they don't care because there must be some very damning evidence against him in the Epstein file yet to be released. Because you have to remember, Israel has been pressuring the United States to go into war against Iran forever. Remember like when General Wesley Clark, I think it was back in 1997, he said he revealed in an interview that even back in the 1990s, there was a plan in the Pentagon to go after 7 countries. And Iran was the last country that was left standing on this list. And for the past 7 U.S. presidents, they have resisted the Israeli pressure to go to war against Iran because they knew it would be a complete disaster. Because Iran, they do control over the Strait of Hormuz, the lifeline of the world's energy supply. And so they all knew what the risk is involved, and they all held off. It took Donald Trump to actually do it. So I think Israelis, they must have some very damning evidence against him. And for Netanyahu and Israel, this is also their once in a lifetime chance. They figure they're probably not going to get another president that's so compromised as this one. And for them, for Israel, Netanyahu was on record saying, I don't care what happened, regime change or the destabilization, balkanization, it's all good. It's all good. That was Israel's goal. Israel's goal is to destroy Iran as a potent, coherent political entity in West Asia that could present an obstacle to the greater Israel project. That has been Israel's plan forever. But they know they cannot do it alone. They know they lack the capability to do it, so they have to drag Uncle Sam into it. And now we're doing it. And now I think Trump did it is because the whole Venezuela thing got to his head, and his advisor probably told him this just will be an easy job. We'll go in quick and out. We'll just take out our senior leadership in a decapitation strike, and the rest of the Iranian government will fall over. Well, guess what? They didn't. And this is another thing what the United States, they don't understand. The Iranian, they have their culture, their religion, have this concept of martyrdom. And that's something Americans don't understand. They don't understand about sacrifice. They don't understand the concept of sacrifice for the greater goods. And for the Iranian leader Khamenei, he's like 86 years old. He did not hide in a bunker. He could have hide in a bunker. He didn't. He chose to spend time in his home with his family, and that's where they killed him. Along with his granddaughter, his daughter, his son-in-law. All his family. But now that made him a martyr. And guess what? He was the one, the supreme leader Khamenei was the one who issued a fatwa against Iran acquiring nuclear weapon. And the United States just took him out. And on top of that, they took out all the negotiators that was involved in the negotiation with the United States. So, U.S. has no desire for peace. U.S. and Israel, they have no sincere desire for peace settlement. Their goal has always been dismemberment of Iran, and that's what they're doing right now: destabilization and dismember of Iran. So Iran, they're fighting for survival. This is an existential fight for them. This is why this is not a fight that U.S. can win, because for United States, this is really not an existential fight. we do not need to be involved in Iran at all. Iran do not pose an existential threat to the United States. This is a war that Trump chose to go after, and now we're seeing the consequences. Trump is already desperate. They have just lifted sanction. They had just lifted sanction on Iranian oil. First they lifted sanction on Russian oil because they realized, oh crap, we have to increase the supply of oil worldwide. But you know what? If you think about it, they're actually not increasing the supply to the global oil market because Russian oil has always been available to go to, before it was China and India, and then India was pressured by United States to stop purchasing. So Iranian oil and Russian oil, they were going to China. And now United States have to put a sanction waiver is because U.S. know all its allies are getting screwed. You have countries like South Korea and Japan who are 90% reliant on oil coming from the Strait of Hormuz. And now this is why U.S. have to waiver the sanctions. So they will at least allow Japan, Philippines, South Korea, etc., to be able to purchase Iranian oil and Russian oil, because otherwise they would have been totally screwed. And Australia as well. Australia, they depend on 32% of Australians' jet fuel come from China. And after the war started, China says, you know what? We need all the gasoline and diesel for ourselves. We're going to stop exporting. Because China was one of the largest exporter of petroleum product, even though China was a large importer, because China has a huge refining capacity. They are one of the largest exporter of diesel, gas, and jet fuel in the region. And they supply Australia with 32% of its jet fuel. Well, guess what? That 32% is just gone like that. Because China's like, sorry, we have to keep it for ourselves. We can't keep exporting. And on top of that, China also put a ban on export of fertilizers, nitrogen, potassium, which is very important fertilizer. That's what many people don't realize. Fertilizers also synthesized from oil and gas. And China says, okay, we have to serve our own people first. We're no longer going to export those fertilizers. So all these other countries are screwed. Right now it's planting season. It's spring, it's planting season. This is when the farmers start to plant for the whole the new year. And they're gonna need a lot of fertilizer. And Qatar gas just been completely cut off. And not only agriculture is impacted, helium. Taiwan, I just saw a tweet. Somebody says, "Oh, TSMC, the Taiwan Semiconductor, is a Strait of Hormuz for AI." I'm like, no. The Strait of Hormuz is a Strait of Hormuz for AI, because Taiwan Semiconductors, they depend on 70% of their helium supply coming out of the Persian Gulf. Mostly from Qatar, and that has been completely cut off. And you need helium to make semiconductor chips. Well, guess what? Forget about that. And thanks to United States, the Donald Trump's dumb decision, you can forget about. Iran is going to put the final nail in the coffin to the whole AI bubble right now. I was joking, because. The new Doom movie was coming out. For people who read the Doom series, the whole series, the whole book of Doom was on the premises before the story of Doom took place. There's something called the Butlerian Jihad, where the people revolted against the thinking machines, right? And they wipe out all the thinking machine, all the AI and stuff. So I made a tweet. Now, the Butlerian Jihad is now, and Iran just started it. They started it against the whole AI thinking machines. By wiping out the helium supply, you're not going to get your semiconductor chips. And forget about expansion of your AI data centers. You're not getting the AI. First of all, AI is also very energy intensive. So first, you're not getting the chips. And then you're not getting the energy to run your data centers. Because AI is very energy intensive. So actually Amazon, a lot of those big companies actually put their AI center in the Gulf region, in United Arab Emirates, in places like that, because they thought, oh, we're being smart. We're going to put our AI center closer to the energy supply. Well, all those AI centers are under attack by Iranian missiles and drones right now. So for the longest time, the United States economy would have been in recession if you'd taken out all these humongous investment into AI industry. Well, guess what? The AI industry, you can kiss the AI industry goodbye right now, because they're not going to get the energy to run it. All their data center in Middle East is getting decimated. They're not getting any more helium supply to make more chips. And this is going to be a problem for everyone. Fertilizers, fuel. You don't have fuel. You see, this is why while the war was going on, you see neocon think tanks like Hudson Institute was putting out they're giving blowjob to Trump in pieces like, oh, this is Trump playing 5D chess. This is really a 5D chess move against China. Trump is grabbing all the energy supply in the world, from Venezuela to Iran. And so by the time Trump goes to meet Xi Jinping in Beijing, he will have a strong hand. He will have China by the balls by controlling all China's vital energy supply. Well, guess what? Trump is now thinking about postponing or cancel his trip to China, because he knows he will show up with a very, very weak hand. China is actually best positioned to weather the storm right now, because China has been stockpiling their strategic oil reserve for the last 4 years. They've been taking advantage of the historically low oil prices by purchasing a lot of oil from Russia, from Iran, from Saudi Arabia, from Africa. So China has about 1.2 to 1.5 billion barrels of oil sitting in their strategic oil reserve. And they have another 144 million barrels of Iranian oil heading their way. By the way, Iran right now is exporting more oil to China than they have ever done before the war, and they're doing it at a higher oil price too. So this war has been, in terms of economy, is the whole waiver of U.S. sanction, and now Iran is exporting more oil. Iran and Russia is going to benefit from the high oil prices, and that will allow Iran to make more missiles. Unlike China's relationship with the United States, where China announced they put a ban on rare earth minerals to U.S. military industrial complex, which makes it very hard for U.S. to be able to replace its arsenal of Patriot missiles and all the other missile interceptors. Iran does not have that problem. China has been supplying Iran with chemical precursors that's needed to make missiles. That China has sent those shipments both before the 12 Days Wars and after 12 Days War. So Iran got enough material from China to make more missiles and to keep their missile barrage coming, their missile and drone strike coming. And the supply lines to Iran from China and Russia, they don't need to go through the shipping or the world shipping lanes. They can go either over land, over the railroad that China helped build, or they can go over Caspian Seas from Russia. Mm-hmm. Both cases are outside of the reach of the U.S. Navy. And what the U.S. Navy is doing? Well, the USS Ford is having some medical episode, a fire in the laundry room, right? First they said they had a shit overflowing problem on the ship, and then the fire in the laundry room that the 600 sailors lost their beds. At this point, it's less embarrassing for them just to say, okay, Iranian missile hit us. Yeah. If they just say Iranian missile hit us, it'll be less embarrassing than whatever story they're putting out right now. Or fire in the laundry room. We have to send the USS Ford back to ports for repair. And the other aircraft carrier in the group, in the region, the USS Lincoln, it put 1,000 kilometers between itself and Iran and the coastline of Iran. It went behind behind the whole country of Oman to hide behind the mountains from Iranian missile and drones. And this is this is apparently the largest battle the U.S. Navy has engaged in after World War II. We know that because back in the Red Sea operation a year ago, they said, "Oh, this is the most intensive naval engagement we have been involved in since World War II." Well, this is much bigger than the so-called Operation Prosperity Guardian, which they failed to stop the Houthis. And so what this war has shown is really show that U.S. is a paper tiger. It cannot stop the attack on the U.S. bases. It cannot protect its so-called allies in the region. Then what is the use to have U.S. presence in the region? The whole premise of U.S. empire in West Asia is so they extend their security umbrella to cover their ally, to cover UAE, to cover Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Israel, but all of them are under attack, and there's nothing U.S. can do about it. We haven't seen the U.S. boasts it has the world's most advanced anti-missile system. Well, we see if you have enough missiles, you can overwhelm whatever anti-missile system they put up with. Because those anti-missile systems are expensive. Each missile interceptors cost like upwards of more than $1 million. In terms of that system, the THAAD interceptor costs tens of millions of dollars, and the Iranian drones only cost like $30,000, $50,000 US. They can make more. U.S. is not going to win this war of attrition, while its whole physical infrastructure for its empire has been severely degraded. Remember, Pete Hegseth was saying in a press conference, he was lashing out. He was totally have a crash out. He said, "Don't you understand how hard it is? What it is like for our pilots to fly 36 hours straight?" And you were like, why are the U.S. pilots flying 36 hours straight? Well, that's because they can't use any of their bases in the region anymore. They have been destroyed, so they have to do it from much further away. This is why U.S. pilots have to stay awake for 36 hours. They're on drugs. They're giving. There's no way, man. They're flying 36 hours straight. They're on drugs, man.
I think taxes are something that makes all of us panic, whether or not you want to admit it. Being able to pass my taxes to a TurboTax.
And this is the state of the U.S. empire, unfortunately. And Trump has done his best job to show that empire has no clue. He really showed that the U.S. empire is actually naked, exposed, and all the rationale for the U.S. empire system is getting blown to pieces by Iranian drones and missiles right now. And remember, Pete Hegseth said they'll gain air superiority over Iran in the coming days. Well, that was like a week ago, and two F-35 had just fallen out of the sky since. And this is a big deal because if they can't use their F-35, that means that you have to use their older legacy of airplanes, which means they cannot easily cross into Iranian airspace. If you've seen all the attacks on Iran, they're mostly concentrated on this corridor on the western side of Iran. So what that means is they're flying their planes right up to the border of Iran, and they're firing off all the standoff munitions like cruise missiles into Iran because, again, they do not have air superiority. They're afraid of Iranian air defense, and those cruise missiles numbers are limited. This is what's a problem they had known since the 12 Days War. The first is the missile interceptors that has been depleted, and now they've been depleting their standoff munitions as well. Their hope was they will gain air superiority, so they will be able to fly B-52 over Tehran and drop bombs, like those or maybe even laser-guided bombs, because those are cheaper, and the U.S. have plenty. But so far, U.S. has shown it has no air superiority. Your F-35 just went down. I think they have some medical emergency, in the far lands of Pentagon. And what this really has shown is if U.S. cannot take on Iran, there's no hope. There's no hope whatsoever for U.S. war against China. I mean, forget about it. Don't even think about it. This was a proven ground to show how much of paper tiger the U.S. military really is. That they used to boast, how U.S. military has tons of combat experience, whereas the Chinese, they have none because they haven't fought a war for a long time. They haven't fought a war for 40 years. Well, guess what? It turns out the U.S. combat experiences has been composed of striking against gold herds and Afghan weddings, and this is the first time. They have never fought an enemy with access to satellite intelligence before, and this time is different. This time is different because Iran is getting help. Iran has very good targeting system right now compared to what they have done in the 12 Days War. This time they know where to hit, what to hit, and both their own indigenous capability has improved. Iran obviously has some very good human intelligence on the ground, and they're getting satellite targeting help from Russia and China, and this is why the U.S. satellite company had now put a temporary pause on the satellite images coming out of West Asia for like 92 hours. But, that's not their official reason. Is like, oh, yeah, we don't want to aid the enemy. Look, Iranians, they don't need you. They have access to Chinese satellites. So what they're really doing, they don't want you. They don't want you to know how much U.S. infrastructure has been damaged, but thanks to Chinese satellite companies like Mizar Vision, we can see now it's all freely available on the web. We can see the extensive damage the Iranian missile and drones have wreaked on the U.S. bases, and NATO just announced they're taking out their mission staff out of Iraq. First of all, why is NATO still in Iraq? But anyway, they're pulling out. French also said the same thing after one of the French officers died in Iraq. These guys, all these NATO countries, that have been deeply embedded in the region. Despite what Donald Trump's complaining about, NATO is a paper tiger. Well, it's true. It is true, but he said NATO will be a paper tiger without United States. Well, then why are you complaining? U.S. is the largest military in the NATO. If United States can't do anything to open the Strait of Hormuz, what's a couple more French and German ship is going to help? Nothing. And the Europeans knows it too. They don't want to go down with the ship right now, and and this is why but the problem is we're in a very dangerous phase of the war, because Donald Trump tried to find an off-ramp, but there's no off-ramp. It's not up to him to end the war right now. It's the Iranians. Go back to the book Doom. There's a famous quote from Doom: whoever can destroy a thing controls it. It's the Iranians that control the flow of the oil right now. United States went in thinking they can control the flow of oil and dictate who gets the oil, who doesn't. Well, guess what? Iranians are setting the terms right now, and they're the ones that says, okay, Chinese ship, okay, and oil that's paid in Chinese yuan, okay. Iran is decolonizing West Asia and de-dollarizing at the same time. I mean, Iran single-handedly is dismantling the U.S. imperial system right now in West Asia. And it's beautiful. I love it.
And one thing, two fun facts. The Beidou system is far more advanced. It has far more satellites in its constellation, and it's far more accurate than GPS. Most people don't know that the Chinese satellite system is more advanced, more modern, and it's larger than and more people have switched to the Beidou. And in the strategic documents that were signed between Iran and China, Iran gets access to the Beidou system, so they don't need GPS or the European satellite system or whatever. So they have that. Another fun fact before we go further, I saw Flying Crocodile says this, that, you know, I'm a student of history, so when I see things, I have to point it out. Flying Crocodile says something about the great Satan. Let me pull it up. Here it is, right here. Flying Crocodile says, America is living up to the Iranian expectation as the great devil by doing extremely evil and illegal acts. As a matter of fact, do you know where that term came from? Since I'm a student of history and I studied West Asia and Persia, actually this took place in France. When the Ayatollah Khomeini was in France in exile, he met with the Honorable Elijah Muhammad out of the United States. And that is when he went back to Iran, he started calling the United States the great Satan and Israel the small Satan. So I'm a student, I'm a history student, and most people don't even know that, but that is a fact right there. So let me go further. Carl, so someone wanted to ask you a question. I believe it was someone called Sheena or Sheila. Chanel, 3202 wanted to ask you a question. Let me scroll down to it before we go further, because she said, please, please, please. And I wanted to respect her wishes if we can. So she said, please ask Carl, is it beneficial to Iran to get payment in rial instead of yuan? I don't think so, because the rial is not convertible like that. But what is your take on that, Carl?
Yeah, actually, you're wrong. There's a couple benefits of getting paid in yuan. Is they can then use that yuan to go buy more stuff from China, and China is a world manufacturing superpower right now. They can make everything. So just the power of yuan, I think, will go a lot further than real at this point, at this particular juncture.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
so
U.S.
Carl, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, I was responding to that. U.S.'s response, sending more ships. This is the worrying part. That the part I worry about, because U.S. is sending couple ships with 5,000 U.S. Marines from their bases in Okinawa to the theater in West Asia right now. And as we speak, those ships are transiting through the Strait of Malacca from Singapore, and it's going to take them 2 weeks to arrive in position. That means they at least expect minimum the war will last more than 2 weeks, before the Marine will even arrive. And this is really bad for the world economy, of course, to have to have the oil blockage to go on even longer. So right now, their estimate, even if the Strait of Hormuz were open today, it would take 6 months to restore all the oil infrastructure to get the oil flow again at the same rate as it was before the war started. So either way, we're looking at a very dire situation for the world economy right now. And this, the oil price had finally skyrocketed. And this is because nobody expects a quick resolution anytime soon. And by the way, that 5,000 Marines is not going to make any dent. I mean, this is ridiculous. Trump is expecting to send them to take over this island in the Persian Gulf from Iran that hosts Iran's oil facilities. This Iran's coast is very jagged, with many high cliffs. For the people who are students of history, people must remember this. There was this thing called the Campaign of Gallipoli in World War I, when the British Empire sent mostly Australians and New Zealand soldiers try to take Gallipoli from from the Ottoman Empire in order to open the Strait of Bosphorus so they can supply Russia through Black Sea. Well, the Gallipoli was a complete disaster because they're trying to do a beach landing, and they're surrounded by the high ground, so the Ottomans can just pick them off from their higher position. And this is exactly type of geography the U.S. Marine is getting into. They're going to be like, Iranians will shoot them like shooting fish in a barrel. And this is all because Trump's ego cannot allow him at this point to do a full climb down and just declare victory and go home. I think he very much would like to declare victory and go home, but right now, if he does, it's basically a complete admission of defeat on all fronts, because the U.S. empire is going to be gone from Midwest Asia and possibly forever. This is why he is hanging on, and that's a dangerous part. Is he will drag this war for a long time, and this is what happened in the Vietnam War. By the way, all the Pentagon planners knew full well going into the Vietnam that this is a war of attrition that they cannot win, because if Vietnam was getting fully supplied by China and Soviet Union, but they still dragged the war out for years because there's no political will to stop it, because they thought, oh, we cannot afford to look weak, so we got to just keep going to send more working class young men into the meat grinder. And that's exactly what's going to happen. They're going to send more working class American kids go to die for Israel. This is very unfortunate.
I'm not really a cupcake, but I am super baked, thanks to Mood Canada.
Mood is third-party tested, so you know it's safe.
And it should.
Those who don't learn from history usually repeats it, right? And what we're seeing, the empires of yesteryear and how they collapsed, and we're seeing that in real time in our lifetime. Carl, but someone wanted to ask you something, and I think it slipped my. I want to apologize to everybody because this thing is going so fast, and I'm trying to pull questions out of there, but it is jumping. So, but Carl, are you calling Pete Hegseth a liar? He says that the United States is winning and everything is going good, and you're telling me that he is lying and that America is strong and proud and they don't need any help?
Well, the Pete Hegseth has said we have been winning for the last 3 weeks. Every day he comes out is win. I mean, there's too much winning. I can't take it anymore. like Trump said during his campaign trial, we will win so much, you'll be sick and tired of winning. I am sick and tired of the Pete Hegseth win right now. I mean, we can stop winning anytime. But Pete Hegseth, let's remember. Pete Hegseth, what was his job before he became Secretary of War? Dude is a live show host for Fox News. That's his job qualification. And Trump, he is another reality TV show host. This is what happened. Our country, United States, is literally run by bad TV personality right now. All they know how to do is to act tough in front of the camera, to huff and puff. That's what they have been conditioned to do, but they don't know anything about how to run a country, much less an empire. And it shows. And right now we are living. This is why I used to joke that Trump is my president because he is my president for the accelerationism of American decline. Well, I mean, that's still true. He has really set the path for the accelerated decline of the U.S. empire right now. And everybody can see how ridiculous. By the way, did you just see the other press conference that Trump held with the Japanese Prime Minister? So Japanese Prime Minister Takaichi came for a visit, and a Japanese reporter ask a question, say, why did you not inform your allies like us, Japan, about your attack on Iran? And Trump says, well, because I want to preserve the element of surprise. You Japanese know everything about surprise. You did not tell me about Pearl Harbor. This is kind of the leadership we have in this country right now. I mean, it's comical. It's comical. And people always say, "Oh, Carl, you laugh too much on the show. It's very serious." Look, man, in the world like this is the best way to cope. This is you have to laugh at it, otherwise you go crazy. This is tragic comedy we're living through, and this is we have a bunch of buffoons for the U.S. leadership. I mean, Iran is absolutely correct. They're fighting the Epstein regime. They're fighting Epstein regime on behalf of the rest of the world.
Mm-hmm. And I want you to listen to this, because after I play this clip, it's a short clip. I was gonna pull it up. I have it in my on my computer, but I don't want it to buffer a little bit, so I'm gonna play it off my phone.
I appreciate the love.
And I want you to listen to the arrogance and the sheer stupidity that's coming out of I'm gonna say it like he said, Pig hates him, P-I-G hates him. I want you to listen to the arrogance of this. This shows you how detached from reality that the leadership is in the Western world, how they can always project onto others what they're doing. So I want to play this real quick. And matter of fact, let me take my headphones out of the computer and Carl, if you can hear it, just let me know.
All right. To that point on capabilities, Iran is an energy-rich country, could be, should be. Instead, like so many other places driven by a radical ideology, they've spent that money instead of investing in their people. And that's why you had millions of Iranians protesting, because they felt like their condition, quality of life didn't match what it could be or should be. And what was the Iranian state? There's a reason we call Iran the #1 state sponsor of terrorism, because they took the money they make and they invest it in tunnels, and they invested in missiles, and they invested in launchers and UAVs, and we are destroying and degrading that in historic proportions. But it doesn't mean they won't still have some and try to hold people at issue, which is why we're fighting every single day to continue to compel. And you mentioned embassies and consulates. Unlike previous administrations, we are doubling and tripling down on ensuring that our people, regardless of their Department of War, Department of State, whatever they do, are secure in those facilities. And the best defense is a good offense. And so we're not afraid to go after and kill anybody. And we have a lot of them attempting to target our diplomatic facilities. Iran, we're not surprised that they would indiscriminately target, and we're still seeing that.
So Carl, I just let me put my headphones back in. So now he was bashing Iran for spending, and I think Iran's defense budget is under $10 billion. And here it is, the United States is 1 point some trillion, but one of the Pentagon former heads who dealt with the budget, I forget his name, he said that whatever the United States tells you that the defense budget is, multiplied by 3 to 5 times. So Mike Maloof, that's what his name is, Mike Maloof, and he does a lot of commentary on RT. So he says that. So now, as he talks about Iran spending money on defense, and I think Iran's budget is under $10 billion, we have an article that came out that says that Pentagon's budget is requesting $200 billion more dollars for the war against Iran. So hold on, just before you comment. So we're sending more weapons, more warplanes, more everything, more troops, and we need more money for a war that we're supposedly be winning easily, and we have destroyed 100% of the Iranian Navy, 100% of the Iranian Air Force. We've destroyed 90% of the IRGC, and we have control over the skies, yet we're spending more money? How? In what world does that make sense?
I mean, every day he's coming and say we destroy another 90% of Iranian capability. I mean, the thing is, if you look at the military budget, U.S. spent far more than what Iran spends on defense, and yet Iran is putting up a very good fight against United States. It turns out all this money that went into Pentagon, it wasn't all that money wasn't spent to win any actual war. Went into to pat the pockets, all the fat cats of the Pentagon contractor, and kick back to all the Pentagon top brass. I mean, it's a system designed for grift, and it works very well. It works very. That's what it's designed for. It's not designed for winning wars, and we're seeing the result of that. And again, they're blaming Iran for actually bother to defend themselves. Of course, it's Iran's fault to put their country so close to all the U.S. bases, and then it's Iran's fault to dare to defend themselves against unprovoked U.S. attacks. We live in 1984, right? But war is peace, and they give a Nobel Peace Prize to this to Machado, who calls for military intervention in Venezuela. We are living a bizarre world of 1984 right now. War is peace, and these guys, just to justify themselves, they just repeat lies after lies. But the rest of the world, there's a decided opinion shift. This recent survey that comes out, that there's a 72% drop in the perception of the United States around the rest of the world. And even in the U.S. ally countries, I'm talking about France, Germany, even UK. And when people were asked, whether China or United States is better for this world, and more people chose China. This is U.S. allies, and because you can't keep on doing this and hope people don't notice. I mean, you can fool some people some of the time. You can't fool all the people all the time. This is the longer the drag, they're going to try to shift the blame. Trump already started. He already blamed his son-in-law, Jared Kushner. He said, Kushner told me this was going to be an easy job, right? And he may very well said that, but you are the dumbass who believed it, because we have such a low intelligence, low information leadership that it can be so easily manipulated into a world war. And so I have to tell my son not to make too much noise in the background. So we are living through a historical moment right now, and I think people don't realize the world is not the same after the U.S.-Israeli attack on Iran. This whole Strait of Hormuz issue is not likely to be resolved anytime soon. And even when eventually it does open up, the worlds will look fundamentally different. First of all, people are going to start to think about energy self-reliance. This is something China has been pushing for. This is why China has been building out its electrification of the country. They electrified the railway, and they did a massive push for the EV transition. So they're less reliant on hydrocarbon for fuel. And for electricity, they're doing a massive rollout of solar, wind, and nuclear power. So China is now like 84% energy self-sufficient. I'm so happy I bought a Chinese EV last year. So now I'm not too worried about the oil price spike at the moment. And I'm also going to put solar panels on my roof, so I will be, so I will be somewhat insulated from this energy crisis. But this is gonna happen all across the world. People are gonna have to think about how to prepare for the worst scenario. One of the problem is this U.S. leadership was so arrogant. They went into the war with minimal planning. I mean, even if they want, even let's say their goal is for the aggrandizement of the U.S. empire, well, you can do it smartly, but thankfully they're being stupid, because the U.S. strategic oil reserve have been drawing down since the Joe Biden years, because they wanted to calm the inflation and win more votes. But Trump, he knew he was going to lose the war. He didn't even bother trying to fill up the strategic oil reserve like China had done for the past 4 years. And and here we are. There's very little plan about what would happen if Iran does close the Strait of Hormuz, which Iran said time after time they would do if United States attacked them. So now this is going to be a bad year, man, for the whole world economy. And Trump and peach heads they have to continually spin up more lies to cover their own asses. But more and more people are seeing through that right
now. I remember what it was. Someone asked the question. All it takes is for a little time, and it'll come right back to me. Someone was asking about a currency swap agreement, and so when they asked me that, I went to something on Google and I put in Iran-China currency swap deal, and the AI overview says this. For the person who put it in, I can't remember who it was, but this is the answer to your question. Iran and China are implementing a 25-year, $400 billion strategic partnership that involves using local currencies, both the yuan and rial, for oil transactions to bypass U.S. sanctions and reduce dependence on the dollar. So that's your answer right there. You can just put those words in that I put in, and you can get your answer right there. So yes, but what we're watching, Carl, is desperation more than anything else. Because you have to understand that time's an empire. Time is no longer on the side of the Western world. And when I use an analogy often about a boxer that has been the champion so long. And when they see an up-and-coming, a more youthful opponent that is stronger, can take more punches, that is faster, that has better footwork, that can move quicker, that has more endurance, it frightens them. And so they try to put up every obstacle before that person has to finally meet them to take that position. And I believe this is what is going on. America did not just attack China outright. She went around trying to weaken China's resolve and partnerships with other nations, the same as what she did with Russia after the breakup of the Soviet Union and how she gobbled up former Soviet nations. And then after she gobbled those up, she started lighting geopolitical and political fires in nations surrounding Russia, so as to have Russia preoccupied with that stuff and wasting manpower and money on trying to put out those fires. And I think she thought that I can go after China now because we've just inserted troops into Nigeria, where China gets a little oil from. We just deposed Venezuelan President Maduro, where China had investments in. And now, if we get Iran, which is the prize of all prizes, we now cement ourselves in West Asia, and we have China and Russia completely surrounded. We're in their underbelly. We can stop the North-South corridor. We can stop the Belt and Road Initiative. We can control China's rise, and then we can prevent Russia's reemergence as a superpower. All of that if we could just take out Iran. What do you say about that?
I sometimes I wonder, whether U.S. do have like a grand strategy, master plan, or this is just, U.S. stumbling all the way. But in either case, even if they had a grand master plan, the execution is horrible. Like what Alan Greenspan said about the Iraq War. right? Alan Greenspan in his memoir, he said, we went into Iraq war to control the flow of oil. Well, they're still doing it. I mean, this is what they're still trying to do, but it shows it's not the United States controlling the oil anymore. You know, I'm gonna quote that quote from Doom. The people who can destroy a thing controls it. Iran controls the Strait of Hormuz. Iran controls the oil flow to the world. Not the U.S. Navy, very expensively sustained military arms of the United States, and the U.S. really show how weak it is by before every operation, even before this current operation, you have all these bots on social media posting U.S. military propaganda and saying ridiculous things like, "Oh, now Iran's gonna find out why we don't have healthcare." Like, why would you even be prideful of that? Why would you even be proud of that? But on top of that, you don't have healthcare because all the money went into shitty military hardware, which doesn't even work. That's why you don't have healthcare. The amount of money the U.S. has spent so far, this was from 2 days ago, by the way. The amount of money U.S. spent so far is $21 billion with a B. With that amount of money, China built 1,000 kilometers of high-speed railway. You know, just imagine what all this money could do if it was actually plowed back into domestic economy to actually build up infrastructure or investment into education. But that's not what the U.S. elite is interested in. They don't care about building a greater America. They don't care about making America great again. That's just a slogan. They care about lining their own pockets. They want to preserve their own top spot in the social ladder. That's the only thing they care about. They care about preserving the U.S. primacy. Why do they care about preserve U.S. primacy? Because they have set themselves up at the top of the food chain in the U.S. empire. That's what they care about. They don't care about, average Joe from Joe Sixpack from Michigan. They don't care about that. For them, the rest of us are just peons for them to extract rent. Right? To use justifications like war spending to take more money from the rest of the population and put into their own pocket. This has been the case. This is why they locked up Julian Assange, because Julian Assange said the goal is not to win the Afghanistan war. The goal is to wash money from the vast tax bases of North America and in Europe into the pockets of a small transnational security elite. And that the problem with that is, okay, they can keep the grift going as long as they don't blunder into a big catastrophe that's like the one that's unfolding right now at the Strait of Hormuz. Right now, they are seriously screwing up the whole world economy, and this is going to be really, really bad, folks.
Everybody, please hit the like button and take the time to subscribe. Also, don't forget, I have to put this announcement out. Join us tomorrow at 7 p.m. Central Time. Brian Berletic probably be on the show tomorrow if he can make it. But I want to go back to some, Carl. You said something very, very, very important that I believe went over a lot of people's head at the beginning of the show. When you talked about China putting bans on the export of fertilizer. This is in conjunction with, remember, Russia putting bans on the export of fertilizer. And as you said, this is the planting season, and now we see oil and gas prices through the roof. How is that going to affect, forget the Strait of Hormuz for a minute, how is that going to affect the pockets of everybody and the stomachs of everybody in America and around the world?
The price is going to go up, man. The price has already gone up, and it's going to go up a lot more because energy is a primary input to everything. Like it's not just the gas that fill up your car. It's also the fertilizers that are used to grow your food. Everything is energy dependent. And United States economy is actually, I just saw an article in New York Times. United States is actually 40% more oil intensive economy than China. It's more dependent on oil because the big oil controls everything. They are the big sponsors of both parties, and the big oil is going to make a lot of money with the oil price going up. So if you do work for the oil majors, well, you won the lottery. But if you don't, you're screwed. You're screwed because the price is going to go up. You're going to have to pay for the big oil profit for these oil majors. But even for the big oil companies, this is not ideal situation because they don't like big price fluctuations. They don't like huge spikes and volatility because that affects their investment decision. Because for a business to make a investment decision, they have to think long term. Like if I put this money up right now, will I be able to get this money back in 5-10 years time? And what Trump does is he creates a whole bunch of uncertainty, a lot of volatility. And this is why a lot of the big business is very hesitating. Even the big oil companies are hesitating in putting upfront investment right now. This is what they said about Venezuela, by the way. They said they would rather invest in Canada because of the political uncertainties that's involved. And because business loves stability, and Trump is creating instability all around the world. First with the tariff war, and now with the whole energy crisis. I mean, this is going to be really bad, folks. I already said previously. Remember, the U.S. economy. If you're taking away all the investment into the AI bubble, the U.S. economy is already would already be in recession. The AI bubble is not sustainable anymore because AI is very energy intensive. The energy is not forthcoming. Two, I already said, even the making of semiconductor chips in Taiwan is depending on energy from the Middle East. So this is going to be bad all across the board. Everyone will feel the pain. Right now, there's still a time delay. From what happens at the Gulf to the supermarkets, but when that time delay, when it hits, it's going to be a tsunami. It's not going to be like a small trickle. It's going to be a flood, and it's going to be bad for not just Americans, by the way. All the consumers all around the world will have to face this very tough call. When they decide what to purchase in the coming years.
Snap your W-2 and file your taxes 100% free. Plus, get your biggest refund.
Yeah, I remember having Gregory Manarino, an investor, on the show. As a matter of fact, he'll be on the show in about a week or two. But he said that when this thing goes up and when the bond market explodes due to war or due to ineptitude by investors or government officials, that this will be more deadly than a nuclear exchange because people will be hungry. There will be the kids will be starving. There will be shortages of food, and we can see the makings of that right now with the embargo, China and Russia's embargo on America and everybody else about the fertilizer and other things like that. But somebody, Flying Crocodile, one of the channel members and moderators, has a question for you, Carl. And Flying Crocodile, all the way from New Zealand, says, can Carl comment on India's action in sucking up to Israel and China's failure to more aggressively condemn the U.S. and Israel action and move to deter them? Will it collapse BRICS? I think China has been firm. I don't think Flying Crocodile saw the interview given by Victor Gao a few days ago, because he was asked specifically about a threat of a nuclear exchange, because a lot of people have been talking about Israel may go nuclear or the United States may go nuclear. And Victor Gao says that China would not allow that to happen. So I think that is as blunt as you can be about that. So, Carl, what do you say about this?
Okay, a couple of things. First, let's talk about India. I mean, India has really played a very bad hand in the recent diplomatic maneuvers. For the longest time, India maintains a non-alignment position in the world, which means they don't want to be sucked into any alliances. They will pursue their own independent foreign policy. This is why they have managed to maintain a friendly tie with Iran, Russia, and United States. But in the more recent years, the Modi government in India, they thought, okay, by sucking up to the U.S., it will get more favorable treatment from the U.S., maybe in terms of technological transfer, more industry supply chain, maybe relocating out of China into India. And they also understand correctly that Israel has a lot of influence in the U.S. politics. This plays a huge decision in their sucking up to Israel. Of course, ideologically, they're also more aligned with the Zionist government because the Modi government is very anti-Muslim. You have to remember that they're very anti-Muslim. So this another push for their political alignment with Israel and United States, and this has not paid well for them. First they got hit with a high tariff by Trump, and then Trump forced them to give up the Russian oil, which India very, very much depend, and then he went to Israel to hobnob with Netanyahu just right before the Iran war. After the Iran war, Modi was issuing statement of solidarity with all the Gulf countries, UAE, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, but said nothing about U.S.-Israel attack on Iran. And well, I mean, for one thing, I understand why they have to say they're in solidarity with the Gulf countries because, 8-9 million Indian nationals work in the Gulf countries. They send a lot of remittance back home. So Modi does not want to jeopardize that. I understand that. But he could at least make a statement condemning U.S. and Israel on killing of the Iranian top leadership. No, they didn't do any of that. And then what happened was Iran announced, well, Strait of Hormuz is going to be closed to anyone except Russian and Chinese. And they didn't say anything about Indians. And that's when the Indian leadership panicked. They realized, oh, crap, they're not getting more oil from the Gulf. That's when they scramble. They send a delegation to the Iranian embassy to offer condolences. And then and on top of that, India was actually complying with the U.S. sanction on Iranian oil by seizing 3 Iranian oil tankers. And so finally they went to Iran after a bunch of diplomatic maneuver. Iran allowed some Indian tankers to go through under the condition that India released those 3 Iranian oil tankers that they had seized previously. So it's a prisoner exchange program, really. But they really nuked their own relationship with Iran, which previously they had what they called strategic partnership. The Iran and India was supposed to work together in the Chabahar harbor, which was supposed to be a rival to the Chinese invested port in Gwadar in Pakistan. And just forget about that right now. And on top of that, India was invited an Iranian frigate to come to India for a naval fleet review. And as part of the protocol for the fleet review, it required the ship comes unarmed, without live ammunition. And U.S. was also at the same naval fleet review. And after the naval review, the war broke out. The U.S. and Israel attacked Iran. And as the Iranian frigate was leaving to head home, it got sunk off the water of Sri Lanka by U.S. subs. I mean, Indian government said nothing. They invited those Iranian ships who came because to honor the invitation. And then the Iranian ship gets taken out by U.S. in a sneak attack. And Indian government said nothing. I mean, this is blackest betrayal. So this is why they panic after the Strait of Hormuz was closed. They went back to Washington to beg for permission to buy Russian oil again. This has led to the U.S. finally put a waiver on sanction on Russian oil because India they're not getting any oil from Middle East. They're not getting oil from Russia. India is even more oil dependent than some other countries. So before the war, India was buying Russian oil at $50 per barrel. They were getting a $10 discount per barrel compared to the market price, which was $60 per barrel back then. Now they have the honor to buy back Russian oil at over $100 per barrel, and there's the Indian discount is gone for them. Now they have to pay the market price. They have to pay the premium for the same Russian oil which they were just purchasing at half the price a few months ago. And this is all their own doing because they comply with the U.S. sanction. And guess what? India is a regional power. It's an inheritor of an ancient civilization. Why does it need permission from Washington to purchase Russian oil? This is a humiliation after humiliation. Anyway, but this India brought it to itself. This has been a disastrous Indian foreign policy for the past few years. Now I want to talk about this whole China thing. When Chinese,
Hold on 1 second, Paul. I want to add something to you.
Go ahead.
I wanted to add something to what you said. Then you can finish up. Isn't it ironic that after the ship was sunk by the nuclear the submarine and India said nothing? Isn't it ironic that because India said nothing, right after that the United States lift all restrictions on India to purchase Russian oil? Was that a quid quo pro? What?
And also India, just before the war, they signed an agreement to allow U.S. military to station to have port of call in India. They allow U.S. Navy to dock on Indian ports. I mean, and this is given what happened when U.S. bases are being taken out by Iran in West Asia, and a lot of the U.S. Navy assets are now hiding in the Indian Ocean. You bet they're using that agreement. They're gonna, and this is basically an act of aggression against Iran. They have really backstabbed Iran in so many ways. This is gonna have they cause some irreparable damage. And again, they for what did they gain for it? They gained to buy Russian oil at double the price what they were paying before. They were paying $50 per barrel. Now they're going to pay $100 per barrel. That price is continuing to go up, by the way. The longer the Strait of Hormuz is closed, the higher that price is going to go. And this is the real consequences of India's foreign policy. They just play a really, really horribly. And okay, let's talk about the questions about BRICS, and also let's talk about China as well. Recently, China, the Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson was asked a specific question: was China providing material help to arm Iran against U.S. and Israel in this war? What the Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson said specifically was, we stand with Iran on its defense of territorial integrity, of their defense of their homeland. And so let me translate from English to English in Chinese diplomatic speak. So the answer is yes. Yes, China is providing material help. Yes. But this is the difference between how China conduct diplomacy and people like Trump and Pete Hegseth, because Trump and Pete Hegseth, they're really TV personalities. They're TV show hosts. Their instinct is to beat their chest in front of the camera and say, "Oh, we're gonna do the terrible thing to us. We will do this and this and this." China prefer to speak softly, but to do everything behind the scenes. They're not gonna say, "Oh, we're gonna flood Iran with so many materials. They're gonna make missiles up the wazoo." So now China would never say that, but China will say, "We support Iran in their fight against their territory, to preserve their territorial integrity, and they will continue to ship the material Iran will need to make missiles and drones." I mean, that is how China conducts its diplomacy. And another thing, right now, United States actually putting hold an active oil embargo against Cuba, which caused Cuba's electric grid to fail a couple of days ago. And what China and Iran and Russia are doing, they have an oil tanker sitting off the Caribbean, ready to ship to Cuba. China has donated a lot of solar panels that had really been able to provide an emergency stopgap to provide power to the Cuban people. So right now the Cuban electricity grid is back on because they're doing a lot of the emergency install of the solar panels that got shipped from China right now. China is also shipped tons of rice to Cuba, a month supply of rice to Cuba. So while U.S. is trying to starve out Cuba, China and Russia are helping. So I think, the BRICS is fine. BRICS is well, the I in the BRICS is getting wobbly. The I is always the weakest link in the BRICS anyway. But the I can be replaced with either Iran or Indonesia, right? I mean, but China and Russia, they're doing their parts. They're just not like Pete Hegseth and Trump. They're beating their chest and openly threatening people. But they are helping. Yes.
So, Carl, what do you think? Do you think Russia now becomes more suspicious of India because of these moves? And do you think now Chabahar will be offered to the Chinese?
Yeah, I don't think that Chabahar will ever get off the ground, but given that India had all these years to commit the investment to actually build it. I mean, it's like look at the India's indigenous 5th generation fighter program, right? I mean, they have been talking about it for 20 years, and then nothing gets done. And I think that's going to be, unfortunately, what happened to the Chabahar port project. India will try to keep talking about it to keep it alive until Iranian finally gets sick and tired of them, and then offer it to the Chinese at some point. I don't know when it's going to happen, but this is not going to. The Chabahar project is not going to kick off by India anytime soon, especially given the present circumstances. And the problem is India, they have a political culture that's very similar to the United States. Their leaders make big boasts. They also make very big claims. India superpower 2020. Well, now it's India superpower 2030. Anyway, so I don't think nothing. I don't expect anything to come out of the Chabahar project anytime soon. As for Russia, I think Russia, they're fine with the way it is because now they get to sell their oil at a premium to India. The U.S. war on Iran has single-handedly saved the Russian government budget. I mean, they just went from a budget shortfall suddenly to a budget surplus in a matter of a month. So Russia is sitting pretty. They're happy to continue to sell oil to India at market price now. Before India get a friendship discount, but now they get to buy at the market price. So Russia is happy with that arrangement, and India is the one that's going to be continue to pay the price. For. I mean, it's really the ordinary Indians paying the price for the foolishness of their leadership. They're very inept and incompetent leadership. I mean, Modi gives Trump a run for his money in terms of economic mismanagement. But yeah.
Well, Carl, do you think now, looking at everything retrospectively, because of the Ukrainian war and because of the war on Iran, I remember when Russia and India were ironclad allies, but India's betrayal on multiple occasions, especially when it stopped buying Russian oil the way it was, exposed India to Russia. And China has been a bulwark to help keep the West from suffocating Russia's economy. Do you think that the Russians are now skeptical of that so-called ironclad friendship with Modi in India, and are positioning themselves to a more reliable friendship with the Chinese?
Well, I mean, the Russian Chinese relationship was never in jeopardy. The Washington has been talking about reverse Kissingering, pulling Russia on our side against China. That was never going to happen. That was a lot of wishful thinking. And as for India and Russia relationship, well, that relationship goes deeper. It really goes back to their traditional relationship between Soviet Union and India. And so Russia has long been a very India-phile country. They have fond memories of India. So I think that likely will continue. I mean, and again, in the end, the deal worked out for Russians. They're now selling oil at twice the price to the Indians. So in that regard, I mean, India will continue to be a large market for Russia in terms of energy and also in terms of weapon system, because India, they just couldn't get their domestic defense industry in order. So they continually depend on foreign procurement for a lot of their defense needs. They have been buying all over the place. Recently, they're leaning towards the Europeans and the Americans, but they'll be back. They will be back buying more hardware from Russia. So I think Russia will be happily supply India with weapons, with energy needs, and but you will be more transactional. A transactional friendship, like a commercial interest. So, Russia has tried for the longest. Before the BRICS, there was a RIC, was Russia, India, China, was by the Putin's predecessors, the Russian Prime Minister Primakov. He tried to stitch that together, but that didn't really pan out because the hostility India had toward China. India was okay to work with Russia, but they didn't like China. But on this front, even India has changed their stance. They have recently lifted the ban on Chinese investment because they realized they need it. And they actually went to China to ask for shipment of urea, which again is a type of fertilizer, because they are desperate.
And
they're desperate. Yes. They asked China to lift their ban on rare earth and urea, and in return they started to relax some of the restriction on Chinese investment into India because they finally realized, the Americans are not coming through with their promises. They're gonna have to moderate their hostile toward China somewhat. So I think over long term, China and Russia they hold the card, so they will be sitting pretty. It's the Indian government that have to make the change. They have to recalibrate and rethink their own alignment in this fast changing world.
You're talking about Yevgeny Prudnikov. who was the prime minister. He was the one who formed the RICS. But do you think that India has taken note that the American leadership said that they will not allow India to rise, like they made the mistake on China, and yet they're still kowtowing to the very nations that is openly stating that they're going to sabotage its rise?
And this man, I think he was like a deputy secretary or something. This man, he was giving a lecture to an audience full of Indians in India. He was telling, we will not allow you to rise the same way, China has risen. Everybody who's observer of U.S. policy knew that was the truth. John Mearsheimer also said the same thing. He has warned the Indian TV show host back a few years ago, said, United States will also play a balancing game against India if India becomes as powerful and as prosperous as China is today. And now they heard it straight from the horse's mouth. A U.S. government official is saying that, yes, that's confirmed. That's a U.S. official policy. They will not allow India to rise. So I think Indian leadership have some very hard, serious thinking to do, some hard soul searching, and they going to have to make some decisions. They have to make some decisions on how they want to redirect this giant ship that India is. It's the world's largest country in terms of population. I think they will have to come to the realization that if they are serious about developing their economy, industrialize India, they're going to need China's help. They're going to need China's investment. They're going to need China's technology. And that's a realization a lot of the global South countries have already made. The U.S. is not in competition with China. It's not in competition with China. The only competition U.S. can talk about is security competition. U.S. is not in competition with China in terms of providing infrastructure and investment in global South. Not even close. China is the largest provider of those things. If India want to really develop and take off, they're gonna have to find a way to work with China.
Parents, I'm with you. I put off getting life insurance because I thought it was time-consuming and pricey until I found this. I checked a few websites.
Now, closing, Carl. We've talked about Iran. We've talked about Russia. We've talked about Ukraine a little bit. Do you think that one of the reasons that India is so, I would say, so hesitant on dealing with China on a equal footing is because they don't want to finally close out the border issue, because China has closed out the border issue with every nation surrounding it except for India, and India refuses to negotiate what would be acceptable terms, and they have been using the United States as a counterbalance. Do you think that is one of the main reasons why they have been acting the way they have?
Well, one thing, the Indian government have been telling their own population for years, for decades, that China is aggressor. China is squatting our land. So now if they suddenly say, oh, we actually, those are Chinese land, we're rejoining the border, it's going to be immensely politically unpopular. So there's no political leader in India, I think, have that kind of political will to settle the border. And on the other issue, there's an incentive issue for the Indian military. The existence of the border issue is very convenient for them to continually depend on budget increase. It's like, we're fighting this big bad China. We need more investment in our border posts. We need more investment in different equipments we need to fight China. So Yeah, unfortunately, the border issue it's just not going to go away, and this is the biggest thorn on the side of Indian-Chinese bilateral relation. I mean, China has shown willingness to settle its border issue with every other country, because the other countries are also willing to settle their border issue. The really holdout is the Indian government, because there's no political will to finally man up and say, okay, sorry guys, we actually had this silly inherited this colonial legacy from the British that we are going to finally set right, cast aside the historical burden. No. Instead, for the last 50, 60 years, they have been telling the Indian population, China is squatting our land, we have to throw the Chinese out. And how do you make 180 term from that? You can't. And then, so I'm not optimistic on settlement of the border issue anytime soon, which means the Chinese-Indian relationship is always going to be testy, which is very unfortunate, because really there's not much real reason for these two countries to have a hostile relationship. High fence make good neighbors. They have the highest fence, the whole Himalayan range in between them. But India decide to make an issue against some rocks that they claim they're theirs.
I was listening before we close out. I was listening to, and I listen to this guy a lot. He's a former high general in the Indian Armed Forces, and he was talking about how India came almost a panic when the war with Pakistan broke out, when they used some of China's weapons, and they were so advanced that they nullified everything that the Indians did, and how they're trying to bury that story. And he said, it comes to the real, they're starting to come to the realization that China is decades ahead of not only India, but some aspects of America and certain military technologies. And this may be the lever that will force the Indian establishment to finally come to the table and settle the border dispute, because if they don't do it, if China really wants to, they could just take it. But China wants to be fair, and they don't want to dust up the border. They want to be neighbors with them. So this was an Indian general actually saying this. What do you say about that?
No, that's exactly right. I mean, China has no motive to create the border tension with India. For decades, China is trying to improve its relationship with India to increase the bilateral trade relationship. And India is the side that has been wary of getting closer to China, because they think it's going to be a Chinese takeover of their economy. This is why they India was the first country to ban TikTok, by the way. They did it before United States. They're the first one to ban TikTok. And they were banning Chinese investment into the Indian startup scene. Indian tech startup were getting a lot of their capital from big Chinese companies like Tencent, Baidu, ByteDance, etc. But then the problem is that all these new Indian tech startup threaten the monopoly on the Indian economy by the Ambani and the Adani family. Those are the backers, the financial backer of Modi. And so these Indian oligarchs, they want to maintain their monopoly in India so they can continue to collect rent from everyday Indians. And they have their man in the government, Modi, that will do their bidding. This is why, there's some let's just say there's some structural problems between the India-China relationship. And those structural problems mostly present in India. And so this is why I'm not overly optimistic.
Coffee, follow me.